going to stop this thing?
May, your backpack!
Huh? That could work! Trissa, pulse bomb! Here you go!
This is getting hot!
Ready!
Go long!
Right! Got it!
Victory is ours, my friends!
Hi, Lena. Brigitte? Oh my gosh, you've grown! Oh, everyone, this is May. Hi, everyone.
Nice to meet you!
Reinhardt.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Monsieur, does this mean Overwatch is back?
Yes. Yes, we are.
We're being overrun! Null sector is everywhere! I'll hold them as long as I can.
What are you doing here?
It's happening again.
Paris was just the beginning. This is a global invasion.
So, how's Overwatch enjoying our city?
It's beautiful, except for all the killer robots.
Look up there! That's the command ship!
Then we know what we have to do.
Oh, yeah!
You're with me. We're getting aboard that ship.
I knew you would return one day.
It has been too long, Master. I can't do this.
You've made your choice. Nobody will stop us. Trouble is cropping up all over the world. It's not just Null Sector.
A lot of lives are riding on what we do next.
We'll have to fight. One city at a time.
Let's get them, Brigitte!
I've got you, Papa.
Watching your back.
Now that's teamwork.
Time to learn some new tricks. Hey, chill out.
Hammer strike!
Do not worry, I will push it. Okay, other direction. I am good at pushing things.
Sojourn here.
Welcome everybody to BlizzCon. We know that you all want to hear more about Overwatch 2. Allow us to invite you behind the scenes to explain more of what we're doing and why.
Everybody, please hit record. Fingers crossed.
We lost Scott.
It's off to a good start.
This is going great.
We've been assembling one of the best teams that I have ever worked with.
I'm nervous.
And I'm so proud of the progress that we have made together.
We really liked the stylized drop down.
Imagine that it's coming forward, boom, boom, this starts to spin.
The scale and the scope of this game have meant that we've needed to grow substantially.
We have to...
Sorry. Let me start.
Overall, I think we've done incredibly well as a team moving to work from home.
Oh, shadow play.
There have definitely been challenges, but the team is really putting everything we've got behind this game.
To me, it's the next big step in the Overwatch universe. New heroes, game modes, major story beats.
With competitive and PvE, I see Overwatch 2 as the Overwatch for all of my friends.
You know, we're always inspired by what story and franchise development does with their animated shorts. We really wanted to bring that cinematic experience into the game.
You can invest in your heroes and grow them over time. I am super geeked out about Overwatch 2.
I can't wait for people to play this game. It just gets better and better.
There are some things that we just can't do without a sequel. So thank you so much for your patience so far, and I hope you enjoy this behind-the-scenes look at Overwatch 2. All of our players at home, they want to see one of the new maps that we've never talked about before.
Really? I can just talk about anything that I want to?
Yes.
You're serving this up to the guy that is like unintentionally leaked information in past interviews.
You can do it officially now.
Okay. So one of the maps that I'm most excited for in Overwatch 2 is our Rome map.
We always want Overwatch to feel like this globe-trotting adventure for our players. So we're having a lot of fun coming up with the Overwatch version of Rome.
We wanted a very romantic, sort of this powerful feeling of old world architecture. One of the most exciting things for me is the early building of these maps, where we get to sit down together with key people from the environment team, level designers, effects groups. We'll spend some time talking about moments in the game that we really want to see, like the Colosseum or a grand view of the hills of Rome in the backdrop. And then we'll go back and do a paint over, or we'll do a concept painting of certain things based on that.
We try to draw inspiration from as many different sources as possible. For example, one of our environment artists had just taken a trip to Rome, and he returned with thousands of pictures and was so excited to work on a map set in Italy.
There's a lot of ancient architecture in Rome that represents the empire that it used to be. So we brought some of that back. Some of the things that are destroyed in real life, we kind of rebuilt in a kind of an Overwatch style.
It's one of the most beautiful pieces of environment art that I think we've made for the entire game, and it just absolutely took my breath away.
Can we reveal more maps?
Yes, Scott. Scott, why don't you have the honor? Why don't you reveal, like, is there an artified, like, let's pick an artified one.
I know what map I want to talk about. It's the one that I just get super excited about. New York City. New York City is just an amazing Overwatch location.
We're really striving to make it as authentic as possible while still putting this Overwatch spin on it.
There's a lot of amazing buildings and architecture pieces that just, especially for artists, stands out a lot. And they usually use this kind of Art Deco style from the 1920s, 1950s.
We started in an area that's a little bit like the Village. There's some smaller shops there. There's a fire station, little pizza places and things that people that are familiar with New York City will either recognize or maybe see the reference that we're trying to make with some of our different locations. It feels like something you haven't seen in other games before because it's uniquely Overwatch.
Well, we should move on. Otherwise, we just have to reveal more maps. So we were talking about PvP. And, you know, one thing that I think is really interesting about PvP in Overwatch 2 is some of the philosophical changes we're making to the approach.
PvP feels different and new. We're upgrading our combat feel. The roles are playing differently. When it comes to all new maps, it's a pretty big departure from where we are on live right now. So I can't wait to see where we end up with it by the time we launch this thing.
We're also experimenting with the idea we call role passives, which are passive abilities that a hero can have based on what role they are. For example, currently in our internal builds, the tank heroes all have knockback reduction against them, and they also generate less ultimate charge for enemies that are shooting at them. Damage dealing heroes have a movement speed bonus, which is great for flanking around the map. And healing heroes, support heroes have automatic healing that kicks in after they haven't taken damage for a while, very similar to Mercy's passive, but a little bit of a lower rate.
One of the more shocking changes that we've been exploring in Overwatch 2 PvP is that's applied to all of the tanks. We want to try to make them more toe-to-toe brawlers and less characters that just stand back and protect other people.
So, for example, for Reinhardt, we've given him 2 charges of Fire Strike, so he can throw Fire Strikes a lot more aggressively and more often. Also, his charge, he's able to cancel it now, and you can steer it more aggressively, so you can, you know, not quite turn a corner, but you can definitely more accurately pin targets. And because you can cancel it, it allows you to use it much more aggressively and, you know, really go after those key targets without feeling like you're going to sacrifice, you know, all of your positioning, everything to get there. He's almost more terrifying now with this, be able to unleash his full arsenal more often than kind of just being the guy with a shield.
The changes to Reinhardt that we're trying, and they might not ship, that's just the reality, but the changes that we're trying right now are to try to embrace more of that instinct that players have when they want to play a big burly character that looks aggressive and feels like it should be aggressive.
Shortly after BlizzCon, we spun up this group, our Combat Field Group, to really just work on what happens when a player holds the trigger.
We're putting a ton of effort into looking at all of our characters and trying to give them even a more visceral weapon feel.
From sound to VFX to animation to the design of these units, all new sounds for a lot of our weapons in the game, and a whole new sound system that's driving it. And we didn't just level up a unit, we leveled up the rest of the game.
When we first started working on Overwatch, you know, we spent quite a bit of time working on gunfire sounds and just general combat feel to make it feel really awesome. We're revisiting pretty much everything, nothing's off the table, so we're looking at even kind of small things such as quick melee attacks that every hero has. So they have kind of new audio pass and a new kind of feel and visual effect when you hit things.
One of the bigger efforts we're undertaking for Overwatch 2 is what we're calling our Weapon 2.0 sound pass. What this is a big overhaul systems in the game. That means the way the gun feels in your hands, you could feel the ammo running out as you're getting lower on the clip. We've really tried to amplify those sounds to better encapsulate the gameplay and the gunplay that comes with Overwatch 2. Another key for the weapons was getting them to feel like they're in the environment. This meant working with convolution reverb. It's a new system that we've implemented into Overwatch. It's a way that we can capture the acoustics of an environment and transport it onto the sounds that we're using. So we went and captured tales of guns in different environments through our weapon shoots.
Wow.
And then we've cut them and applied it so that we can support a lot more environments. Now we're supporting outdoor, urban outdoor, warehouse tales, tight tunnels, small rooms, and it gives a lot more presence to the weapons and the way that they react in the world.
The shooter genre has evolved a lot since Overwatch 1 came out. On top of that, I think we really want to push the visceral nature of how we do combat. So we focused a lot, not just on the wonderful sound effects, but also with how the gun moves as you shoot. So you can really feel every single shot leaving the chamber. And there's a lot of subtle little tweaks we have to do on the gameplay engineering side to make that feel really visceral. Everything from making sure that the camera shakes are crisp, making sure that if you get shot, you know exactly these tight indicators show up on the outside of your reticle. All these things play into making the game feel not just tight and responsive, but also modern and up to date. Take 76, for example. What we wanted to do in Overwatch 2 with his weapon was make it really feel incredibly powerful, and that happens with a bunch of different elements that mix together. But it really feels like the gun is almost just outside of your control. A lot of that comes down to this camera shake technology, where every time you fire the weapon, you want to feel like it's running through your entire body, and the camera shake gives that extra bite to every single shot out of the chamber. It makes him feel really great.
You guys got a sneak peek of Sojourn from last BlizzCon. She's been under development for quite a while, and she's actually quickly at this point become a lot of people's favorites in-house. When we look back at Overwatch when it was originally created, there was a lot of heroes that were made from a gameplay standpoint kind of surrounding a weapon type. For example, Pharah was based on a rocket launcher hero. Widowmaker is clearly like kind of the sniper. We thought there was a weapon that was kind of missing that would be a lot of fun to play with, and that's a railgun. It's so much fun in the playtest to have this really powerful shot that can, rip through enemies if you really are accurate with it. And she's all about that aim skill. So if you got that aim skill, you'll love her.
We're still exploring new game modes, and we're also reevaluating older game modes that people are more critical of. We're of the mindset maybe 2CP doesn't exist in Overwatch 2, and maybe there's a new cool game mode that replaces it. We really want Overwatch 2 to feel like the next evolution, a true sequel to the first game, not an add-on. It's not a small part. It's not an extension of the original game. This is an evolution and a replacement to the original game, and I think it's exciting. Hero missions are probably one of the things that's the hardest to wrap your head around if you've never played one of them.
The goal around hero missions is for these to be this co-op PvE experience.
I personally only play competitive mode. I'm all about that competition. And I have friends that they don't want to do that at all. So I'm really looking forward to a game that I can play hours and hours with my friends who aren't in competitive, and it's also something that I'm interested in.
Hero missions are the content that people are playing as they are leveling up their heroes. And so for a system like this to really sing, you need a lot of missions. We don't want players to feel like they're just in this grind to get to the top.
And there's a lot of really, really good back-end technology that we're exploring so that the heroes are constantly bringing their personality and some light story to these hero missions as well.
The goal is to make as many as possible, hundreds of hero missions. We've explored a lot of different ways of getting to that much content. So have different sets of enemy units that people will be fighting against, and there's different hero mission types. At the same time, hero missions can take place in all of the multiplayer maps that we've done, and we're also adding new spaces onto some of these maps.
It's a huge challenge for the art team. We take maps that a lot of people love and recognize, and we have to add a lot more art and level design to it.
In this one hero mission playtest, we came up to an area in Kings Row that usually has a gate on it. Suddenly that gate opened and I saw a new area of Kings Row that I had never seen before.
You may be playing a payload game type, and the payload may decide to take this new route instead of going the usual route.
That was really, really cool. It was like this eye-opening special moment.
Lan, our lead tech artist on the environment side, very early on her own free time, made a prototype of a sandstorm on the Temple of Anubis map.
And at the time, we didn't know what we wanted to do with that, but it looked awesome.
We looked at it and went, oh my God, we absolutely have to do this.
So we put some new technology in place that allows us to do this dynamically. You start the mission off, clear day. Midway through the mission, suddenly this sandstorm or heavy weather would show up.
It made the world just feel so much more alive.
There's a sunset, daytime, nighttime, but depending on where you are in the world, these look different. California or Hollywood would have what we call a California sun. In New Bonnie, there's a great African sun that happens there. You sort of get a sense of space and mood. This is what really brings the levels to life.
For me, the dynamic world's exciting. Just seeing these dramatic landscapes, the wind and the atmosphere blowing by. It's a much more cinematic experience for the player.
Before you start a mission, you look at a map. It's nighttime in Necropolis, or there's a sandstorm in Necropolis. Players can make some comp choices based on knowing this information. Characters like Hanzo or Widowmaker start to be a little more valuable because they have abilities that allow them to see through the sand more clearly.
Are we going to talk about any of the types of objectives in hero missions?
Yeah, let's talk about the objectives. Players are being asked to do different things from one hero mission to the next so that they all feel really fresh to the player.
For example, we have Gather and Return, where you're trying to go and grab these different canisters to kind of safeguard them so they don't go off and affect the population in a negative way. It creates this really cool tension in the world where on the one hand you're trying to split up and go grab all these canisters to be as efficient as possible, but at the same time now you're having these sort of special enemy units spawn that are really difficult, and if you kind of get caught by yourself, it turns into a pretty bad situation really quickly. And it feels extremely cooperative and like a very different way to interact with the Overwatch universe.
We're experimenting with all sorts of ideas, and just internally we have names like Wall of Death, Scavenger Hunt, and Kill Quest, and all these new mechanics and enemies for people to experience. Players will be able to jump in night after night, play different hero missions, and then work through the progression system, leveling up their heroes.
At BlizzCon in 2019, we started to talk about progression, and we showed the very early version of our talent system, which I think was really cool. We had that one talent where May became the rolling snowball, which was a big hit. We've really blown that system out.
I'm real excited about talents. You can play the same hero in so many different ways. Now with the skill tree, you can have fun every night doing different things and kind of experimenting.
Yeah, the talent system is really deep and rich, and every single hero has different trees. You might open up 76's tree, and as you're leveling and picking new talents, you're starting to feel your hero change. We've had some pretty hilarious versions of the healing one where his biotic field travels with him. It also repulses enemies. We called it the snowplow build, where 76 is running through spaces, pushing enemies away from them.
Designing these is super fun because it's we get to break all the rules that we've sort of established for ourselves, and we get to really take the gloves off and do crazy things like Junkrat can dual-wield grenade launchers, and we've had Mercy be able to area effect res their whole team at once at super long range through walls. It's been a ton of fun, kind of like mad scientists making all this stuff.
You're all used to using these kind of kinetic weapons like Soldier 76's rifle or fire attack like what Reinhardt's Flame Strike does. As soon as you start to mutate these things with talents, all of a sudden maybe you're doing freeze damage or electrical damage, but it gives the animators a bunch of crazy opportunities. The animations are going to change to show them freezing and shattering. And if you shock someone with a lightning attack, they can shake in place and stun, maybe chain to other enemies. All sorts of stuff to make you feel like you're controlling the battlefield in novel ways.
As a huge RPG nerd myself, the first time I opened up the talent tree system, it was oh my gosh, this is speaking my love language. I just want to plan, and I want to see where do I want to invest and how am I going to play this character.
Yes, it's so great. And you start at the bottom of the tree.
Yes, exactly.
Tracer gets to do what?
Yeah.
And then you start working and kind of planning how you're going to get down there. It's it's so fun.
When we look back at BlizzCon 2019 and we talk about some of the criticisms that we had, one of them as a development team that we felt was that the combat was just not engaging enough. So the fact that our combat wasn't highly engaging to us as players meant that we had a problem with the enemy units and that they just weren't feeling interesting enough.
Just because we show something to the public, it doesn't mean that that is what it's going to be. If we make discoveries where things aren't working how we want, they're not reading how we want, they're not fun enough, we're totally down to reinvestigate, reiterate, and just really find ways to level kind of all aspects of things until they feel good.
I would say a major focus of all of 2020 was to make the null sector enemy units more engaging. And some of this was adding new units and evolving other units that we had.
Interesting combat for us is varied combat for us. So sometimes we're going to ask you to protect something in Overwatch 2. Sometimes we're just going to ask you to get someplace. Sometimes we might ask you to escort something across a map while it's being attacked. And so it's a different type of spawning, and it's a different type of units that are in there, and it's a simpler objective.
There's a lot of units Aaron is talking about. Lots of different units, lots of different types. They serve different purposes. You do different things to them. It's really going to help a lot of us find the fun and make sure that Overwatch 2 is a blast.
Of enemies is what we internally call objective units. And they're typically units that don't even attack players. The simplest version would be something like the Breacher.
It's two legs with this huge bomb on its back. It was built to do one thing, slowly and methodically march towards its objective, and then it transforms, and the bomb opens up like a flower. It starts spinning and charging up, and you hear this awesome sound, and you know you have a little bit of time before it's going to explode and you have to take it out.
We have units like the slicers, which you guys have seen before. They're little, we call them the chickens, like little chicken snares. They're running really fast. You know, we have a guy we're experimenting with right now who flies and drops these bombs that create these kind of ever-expanding smoke fields that you have to escape from, but because they're super deadly. So you really get to use your mobility options to kind of escape that.
There's things like the Polar. You could be moving through these darker alleys, and as soon as you hear that Polar spawn, it suddenly becomes like really spooky and kind of scary.
This very tall, elegant-looking character that's blindfolded, 3 orbs that circle around her as her eyes, and we basically spun those orbs around her head as a big tell, launched them at the player, and then it activates this tractor beam, and it's bringing you in, and then you get this awesome like anticipation of the hair opening up so you know what's about to happen.
One thing we've just recently been experimenting with is this idea of elite units. We didn't want the elite units to feel like they're just, oh, this guy's got double health and double damage. We want to make sure the elite units feel like they have different behaviors and have different attacks. So for example, an Omnic Grunt, normally he fires his gun, he dies pretty simply. If you fight elite Grunts, his weapon fires in a burst fire pattern. It's very deadly if you're close. And if you manage to take him out, they don't just die right away. They instead can crawl on the ground towards you, and you try to back away because if they get to you, they can explode.
Artillery at BlizzCon, we're all just staring at this, and we're like, what are we going to do to level this up?
One of the things we really felt wasn't coming through was the damage states. We intend for players to shoot these guns off, but currently it's not reading as something that can happen in the game easily.
We changed the design, we changed the animation, and we go back and forth and just continually iterate.
We decided, hey, you know what? We're gonna just delete half of these damage states, so now it's super readable.
From an animation standpoint, we decided on the spinning barrel version. Just did this really nice kickback. The tip of the barrel opens up when it's about to fire and shifts into place and boom!
It's really amazing to be fighting an artillery unit and you can see the guns on the side, and as you're shooting the guns, they're actually visibly taking damage, and then you can blow them off and it reacts and kind of stumbles to the side and really makes you feel like you're there, and it's super fun.
In a lot of the stuff we've showed so far, you're fighting null sector. These are evil killing machines intent on marching you down. The way you're going to stop them is by shooting them, and we want to make sure that feels responsive and visceral. Really making sure that when they take a hit, it feels like their whole body has been punched, almost like hit by a truck. That's what really sells this fantasy that you're playing these superheroes. One of the cool pieces of technology that we created was what we call chain hit reactions. Oftentimes you'll find null sector bunched up, marching maybe a half a dozen units abreast. You expect if you shoot one, they're gonna knock into their buddies. So we make that happen. Turns out it's really fun too.
One of the things that we showed last year at BlizzCon was the new looks for our heroes. The theory kind of going in was like, you want to preserve the essence of your hero, but also kind of show that that hero's evolved and kind of changed and moved forward. So we have a lot more new looks. So I'm excited to see how players and fans react to all of the ones that we've done so far.
Maybe we'll share some of those new looks today, which would be cool.
We're going to reveal McCree's new look for Overwatch 2 as well as Pharah, and we're really excited to show off some of our first villains with Reaper and Widowmaker. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about technical wear, kind of like technical clothing. What that really is using very techie fabrics, as well as having very intricate but functional straps designed in a way that is very aesthetically pleasing. With McCree, we took a couple different approaches. He's got this classic cowboy look that it's really hard to mess with, because if you try to make him too sophisticated or too techie, it might not feel right for the character. But as a concept artist, you always want to change things around and try different shapes and silhouettes, so we did identify as red serape as the main thing for McCree. We also tried a couple different things with McCree's cowboy hat. We didn't really want to mess with that too much because that's a very iconic part of him. So that's another piece that we kept. We tried some retro cowboy looks that mixed in some tech here and there. Some that were a little bit more techy than others, some that were a little bit more classic cowboy. We gave him a little bit of a longer beard, and it really gives him a nice kind of like a more aged look. What's different about Pharah than some of our other heroes is Pharah's completely covered in armor. We didn't want to change her silhouette too much. It was more about experimenting on different colors. So it felt really appropriate for her to be the one to harken back to those original Overwatch colors of white and blue. One of the things that we wanted to update on Pharah was her visor. Instead of being completely opaque and reflective, we tried a little bit more of a transparent approach, and being able to see through it a little bit now allows us to see some more of her emotions. Reaper was actually the ones I was very excited to work on, because I could see a lot of potential in how we can integrate his cloak and his cowl and his armor, and how we can make all those shapes really sing within that classic, Reaper silhouette. We tried a couple takes with the first pass, like the completely silver arms, more layers to his jacket. Reaper's mask is obviously pretty sacred to us, but the thing you'll notice immediately is that it's now completely silver. Instead of the bone white, he's got this like almost like deadly edgy silver that just gives him that classic Reaper look. With Widowmaker, we started with the idea stage, exploring a breadth of ideas. We tried things like a more insectoid approach, treasure hunter. One of them made her feel like a classic Bond villain, so we kind of steered it back towards one of the more cyberpunk looking ones, almost like a futuristic femme fatale, which is basically what Widowmaker is, but she even feels more upgraded. So I'm super glad that we went down this route. We played with different hairstyles too. Widowmaker has the really long ponytail that's really key part of her look. And we really liked the hairstyle on one of the designs that was more of a braid, and it was really interesting look that also preserves Widowmaker's original silhouette with that long ponytail.
We've been working a lot with our domino engine and making our cloth look better. Now that we have this cloth tech, we're going to be able to make some really cool, unique silhouettes that will help them stand out from other heroes. We put a lot of time and effort into our face rig, and what I mean by that is we're going to be able to get really close to these characters, and it's going to feel really cool. It is absolutely worth the time and the effort to invest in the technology, and that way we can make these characters do more things that we haven't really been able to do before.
It's been super exciting working on the new looks for Overwatch 2, and it's just been so inspiring to watch the team try things that we've never tried before, and I just can't wait to show off more in the future.
Overwatch 2 is probably the largest opportunity we've had since the inception of the franchise to really expand what Overwatch even means to our players. In 0 Hour, we saw that some of the heroes got back together, but we're also seeing that there seems to be a second huge Omnic uprising. We're going to learn who's behind that uprising, why that's happening, how globally spread is it.
The story and franchise development group, they were really the torchbearers of what the big story is that we were going to tell for this game.
We have a lot of interaction with them. They're working on in-game cinematic intros and outros for every one of our story missions.
It's been really great to see this collaboration grow and develop. The story is just a little more integrated into our missions than it ever really has been before. All the available heroes get dialogue for a given mission. We have NPCs. We have multiple hero choices.
We have all sorts of events that are happening that are driving players to interact with each other or parts of the environment or other characters.
The world of Overwatch is this bright, shiny future. So how do you take that bright, shiny future and create conflict in it? How dark can the world of Overwatch go?
The different challenges that these characters are going to have to overcome in Overwatch 2 are things that they haven't ever dealt with before or dealt with on this scale. So what we had to do was literally strip it down to this bare bones of where are these characters in their lives. Overwatch has been disbanded, and now there's a situation where the world's in trouble again, and the world needs the heroes again, but they're not allowed to be doing what they were supposed to be doing.
We started to book these off-site locations so we could brainstorm over and over different versions of what the Overwatch 2 story campaign could be.
And we basically had these whiteboards that we were carting around everywhere.
The room was filled with whiteboards, and we would just write every day story beats with the characters and who was doing what and where. And oh my gosh, we forgot this character.
We had these giant sticky notes, and each one of them would be a mission with a bunch of notes on it. You know, somebody say, well, what if we moved Rio to the end? And they'd physically grab it off the wall and stick it on the end.
And we did this for a while, you know, until we all felt that it was pretty close to what we wanted.
Then we could send it to our writers' rooms. The writers' rooms then had a much clearer direction of where we wanted this process to go.
Ultimately, we come up with something that we think is right for the game, and then we pitch it back to the game team that we missed.
And that allows us to actually back up and go and make it right and make it better.
Because the scale of this story is so huge, it takes place over the whole world, basically. It just requires a constant iteration, constant refinement to make the story as best as we can make it.
From writing, we go to storyboards. The storyboards get crafted with the edit. From there, it'll go to a previs department where they'll start to flesh it out in 3D. Once we've kind of figured out our camera work and our cinematography, that'll then go to the animation department. And then we end up going right into the game engine.
One of our challenges was to figure out how to integrate this story and this narrative with the gameplay.
So if the intro cinematic ends with this huge battle, this huge war, when you get into the game, it has to mesh and feel the exact same way and blend together.
We really are also trying to get the music to be equally as consistent from in-game cinematics straight through to the mission. Adam Burgess, our lead composer, has been working with the IGC team, with the game team, developing themes for all of the heroes, all of the locations.
As the cinematic director, whatever we're crafting should never override the gameplay. We want to make sure that the player's experience going from the cinematic to the gameplay is seamless and it feels like a completely immersive experience.
The engineers, we have to find a way to actually make that come to fruition. The choreo tool is a tool that allows people to coordinate different events to happen at the same time. Like in Rio, if you played our demo, one of the buildings explodes. And so that kind of event needs to happen as you're running by, and you need to have it timed, because if it blows up too early, then you don't see it. It allows story moments in missions that interact with the environment, that interact with our characters.
The new tech, the new abilities that we have now are allowing us to push our storytelling farther than we could have previously.
What's also really powerful about choreo is that, you know, if somebody has an idea, they can mock things up really quickly.
We got to show the Widowmaker making this awesome introduction. And Casey was able to quickly put a really rough prototype in choreo. And Philip would come in and on the fly, he's making quick changes. They play tested something that would normally take weeks. It was done in like a matter of days.
Each story mission has its own custom map built for it, and these maps are absolutely gigantic.
India is one of our biggest maps, and it's a fun map because it has a few story beats that we've taken from recent comics and characters in the game.
We've written a history for each city so that the cities feel lived in. And I think that informs the artists so that they know like what it is that the city has been through.
Gothenburg was our chance to show Torbjorn's workshop. We created a space that kind of fits his height. So there's, you know, step ladders and scalable tables. We designed the space as if we were Torbjorn. Molten steel is pouring out of walls. It's pretty epic when you walk into it. Toronto is under siege by Null Sector when the players arrive here. There's a dynamic snowstorm. So as you make your way through the level, the snow is slowly building up. Suddenly by the end, the characters are caught in this gigantic snowstorm and they must fight their way through it.
In Overwatch.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Overwatch 2 Developer PvP live stream. I'm your host, Matt Mr. X, and throughout the stream, I'll be joined by some awesome content creators and developers from the Overwatch team as we learn more about Overwatch 2's PvP by watching some of these awesome maps in action played live. It's going to be an extremely exciting day. As Aaron mentioned during the developer update, everything you see today is work in progress, but being able to see some of this stuff day in and day out, it's truly awesome. Really excited for what the Overwatch team has to show for you guys today. So let's bring on some of my guests throughout the day. I'll be joined by the members of the Overwatch dev team. It's Associate Art Director Dion Rogers, Lead Hero Designer Geoff Goodman, and Game Director Aaron Keller. How you guys feeling today?
So much for having us.
Yeah, no, it's going to be exciting. Now, we've learned so much about the PvE aspect of Overwatch 2. We've learned some stuff about, PvP, with push, role passives, new heroes. You saw Sojourn at BlizzCon Line. What else has gone into the development process for Overwatch 2's PvP?
You're right. We've talked a lot about the story side of Overwatch 2 and the cooperative PvE experience that we've been working on. But the Overwatch team has also been hard at work on the PvP side of the game. We're making new features, new heroes, new maps, some of which we'll be playing today. And we've also been looking at the way PvP is played. It's changed over time on the live game. And we'll talk about a lot of the changes that we want to be making and that we're currently making to PvP. But there's one in particular that I want to highlight right now because it's substantial. And I think it has a big impact on the way the entire team approaches PvP on Overwatch 2. And it's also something that we're all really excited about. Overwatch has always been played with 2 teams of 6 players. Overwatch 2 will be played with 2 teams of 5 players, consisting of 2 support, 2 DPS, and 1 tank.
Right. My next question was gonna be is role queue still a thing? So we still have a breakdown across the board. It's not completely open. So 1 tank, 2 DPS, 2 supports. What led you guys down the road to make this change?
There are a lot of reasons for why we wanted to make this change. As I said earlier, Overwatch has changed over time. We've gone from having no hero limits at all in the game before launch. You could pick 6 Winstons if you wanted to for your team composition, to having a hero limit. We ended up introducing a role lock over the course of the game, and we feel like this is the next step in the way that Overwatch ought to be played. If you think about it, there is a lot going on in an Overwatch map. It is incredibly fast-paced, and we have always tried to make our combat easy to read and very understandable. And even with all of the work that we put into that, sometimes it's just hard to track what 11 other players are doing on the battlefield. Removing 2 of those simplifies everything, and it allows players to understand everything that's happening around them and to be able to make better choices because of it. This change obviously has a really big impact on tanks. And we will get into some of the changes that we're making to tanks and to some of the other roles in a bit. But tanks can be problematic. They're a DPS hero is simple. They're shooting. But a tank has abilities that can be noisy, or when stacked with other tanks can cause problems for other teams to try to overcome and counter. And a great example of that is 2 main tanks on the field. Sometimes that can be very oppressive to another team. I think with five players out there is a greater chance of certain people being able to carry. Whether that's the tank on the team or some of the DPS, there's just one less player on the other team that you need to take care of, and each player now has the opportunity to have a larger individual impact on their own team. And we've tried a lot of different versions of this. Internally, we've tried a 4v4 format We've tried 3 DPS, 2 support, 1 tank format. We even, early on in Overwatch development, we tried a 7v7 format of the game. And we always had some problems with them. And this is the sort of thing that our lead hero designer, Geoff Goodman, has really run with, and I think he probably has a little more he can say about it.
Yeah, you forgot about the 4 DPS, 1 tank, 1 healer we ran one time. That was literally one playtest. And it was was
one playtest, and we swore we would never do it again.
Almost cut out in the middle of that playtest.
never to be spoken about again. Yeah, Geoff. I assume that obviously changes to the tank role, but I assume there will be kind of like holistic changes overall, right? I think just changing the tanks, you probably need to rework some of the other stuff that goes on.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a kind of change. So that impacts like the huge part of the game, obviously, and that's the thing about sort of hero design and hero balance is like it's sort of easy in some sense. Honestly, it's easy, but it's certainly easier to make sort of a single hero change, and maybe even like a hero rework like we've done in the past. But to change something so fundamental as there's only 1 tank allowed, really kind of cascades into a lot of different questions and problems that demand answers. So, I mean, the obvious thing that probably comes up in people's mind probably immediately when we say this is, how does Roadhog work in a world where you could pick Reinhardt instead? Like, how is that as an equivalent pick? So that's sort of our first question when we first were doing it too. Like, we liked this 5v5 thing. It was super fun when we play tested it. That has a lot of promise, but okay, we have to solve a lot of problems if we go this way. So that's sort of why it sort of has led to this larger set of changes, and there's a lot of other changes we'll talk about as well, but it definitely cascades. For example, healing, you can kind of focus on 1 tank now, and the tanks are even beefier than they are on live, the individual tanks, because this is one of them. So we're thinking, well, is it too good to just play like 2 main healers and dump healing in your tank, and is it too hard to kill now, and maybe healing is too good now, and it's but this is the time to do it. This is what we wanted to do with Overwatch 2, is look at core things like this and make sure that where we want them to be, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm not a designer, but I think that like this is the first real opportunity you guys have had to reset. Like, you couldn't just do this on the live game, right? I think that's kind of like what I assume, right? Is that this is like a holistic look at the game overall, and like changes that you couldn't do on live because they're just so massive.
Exactly, and like I said, there's other changes that go along with this as well, that are also equally impactful. So it's sort of like we just like shook the ground underneath the game like really heavily, and like all the pieces are kind of in disarray a little bit. So some of the heroes won't even be playable really by our playtesters here, because they're either heroes we're already kind of looking at heavily, or we plan on looking at heavily, so it's kind of not worth showing them in this context, or ones that we haven't addressed yet, things like that. So that just sort of gives you context of like how big this kind of change is.
Well, I want to get right into the game. I want to see it live. I'm sure the fans want to see it live after getting all this like info. The first map we're going to be showing you guys today is New York City. Dion, what kind of map is this?
New York is a hybrid map, so a brand new hybrid map for Overwatch 2, and there's a fun new payload for players to battle over. The world building team had a great time just creating this Overwatch depiction of New York. There's tons of neat details and fun Easter eggs for the players to find. So I think it should be fun to take a look at this.
Yeah, no, when you guys showed this at BlizzCon Line, I was so excited. Obviously from New York myself, would love to see the Midtown Tunnel go over some of the adjustments that you guys have made to it here in Overwatch 2. Just a beautiful map. I have to imagine this is one of the locales that you guys have been dying to do for a while.
We've been wanting to. There's a lot of people on the team from New York or who have spent some part of their life there. So it's always been on the list, and Overwatch 2 felt like the right time to do it.
And no short of Easter eggs, I would say.
No.
On some of these maps so far. Get some love at the beginning. But this will be our first real look at 5v5. I've had the opportunity to like kind of watch some games like as they've kind of tested it out. It still keeps that Overwatch fast-paced feel, but it doesn't have like the kind of the clumped up chaos that you sometimes see of live. I think it kind of speaks to really what you were pointing to, Geoff, is that when you have that one less tank in the equation, you can actually make the tanks more aggressive and more offensive. But it's also just kind of easier for the viewer and just people at home to track.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see probably a lot of play here. One of the biggest things you'll notice, because there's less protection coming from tank players just to directly block bullets for their team. Typically, we'll find a lot more play around the map corners, map angles. Often people going for cheeky flanks and stuff. Yeah, Dion loves this.
Yeah, they get to use the environment a lot more. It's a bit more tactical. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is great.
So it kind of, that was one of the first things that came out of our original playtesting, and we were just like, this is a really good direction. I mean, like I mentioned, there's like, as a designer, you sort of have to look past the immediate problems in front of you and okay, we can fix those. I think we can address some of the tank imbalances and healing issues and all kinds of other stuff. But at the heart of this was really cool, and so that's really what we've been focusing on and working through these problems.
I think something that's really interesting about that too is the gameplay is more fluid than it was before.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times in Overwatch you get these really hard battle lines that get drawn between the two teams, and there's just less damage incoming, and so you're able to kind of move around a little bit more, and you'll see it here a lot of times. The chokes aren't as hard of a space to get through. There's still a choke in the map and you still have to work at it, but there can be a lot more pushing through and pulling back on the choke, and it's something that I'm personally really excited about.
Yeah, I was going to say, how has the 5v5 move affected map design? I feel like it kind of has to have a huge impact on what you guys are able to do, create different, speaking about players being able to take more control of the game, right? Creating more flanking routes, more opportunity for the Ashe to go to the side, get a pick, and open things up for a team.
Yeah, there's a lot more opportunity for players to do that. But at the same time, when you go for a flank, you're not leaving 5 players behind. You're leaving 4 players behind, and so you kind of have to be weighing some of these decisions in your head. The game is just as strategic as it was before, if not more so, because of the individual ability for players to have such a large impact on the match. I think for map design, we've always been really careful to make spaces that feel good just for one hero. And sometimes we might favor particular heroes in different areas, but because of that, because we're able to make a space that kind of feels good for Reaper or a space that feels good for Pharah, I think that we'll still be able to play 5v5 on all of the original catalog of Overwatch maps as well.
Right.
That is a awesome payload, Dion, by the
way. We've always, in the artwork of the maps, we've always placed what we consider cover objects. It just feels now with the 5v5, players will take advantage of that more. Even the previous maps, we planned cover objects to help protect players. Now with 5v5, they're even more effective, these artistic choices.
It's such a great point, too, because we have started placing a little bit more cover in our maps. And if you go back to some of the old maps, if you look at King's Row, that middle section, that street section of King's Row, there's one piece of cover. In that entire section, it's just corners of buildings is what you're using.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you can kind of see it here, even with stuff like that. I know the taxis here in the streets, you have the little kind of windows, the pillar to hide behind in the middle. There's a route through the subway. There's so many different kind of angles you can take. Something we saw at BlizzCon Line was the 2 fire strike, charge, cancel Reinhardt. I noticed something before, Geoff, when we were on with Winston. My Winston on live not able to shoot at range. Can you explain that to us a little bit?
So yeah, I was wondering if people picked up on that. So we were first watching Winston there. This is an example of some of the tank changes we're talking about in regards to 5v5, but also a larger change we're talking about making tanks a lot more aggressive, be able to be a little more hybridy on the damage side and less just raw protection. So on Winston's side, he's ulting right now, unfortunately. You can't see it, but he can't do it while he's ulting. But his alternate fire there, which he's doing right now, there it is. You can charge up a condensed blast of lightning from his gun and fire it off as a single sort of blast attack at longer range. And so he actually, the charge up is kind of interesting with it for him because you could do it while you're leaping, and so there's theoretically more burst combos you can do, where you're jumping on top of somebody, charging up in the air, and burst, release it right before you land on them, and then you get the stomp damage too, and you can shock them or do a quick melee combo. It's a lot more interesting things. On top of the fact that, with some players know, a lot of times you're shock somebody, they're getting away, you think you can finish them, and they just fair boost away, or somebody just barely gets away. You get that extra, alternate fire shot to try to take them out on the way. And it's actually interesting playing against them now, because you now are cognizant of that. So sometimes you're leaving a little earlier, like, well, I'm going to get blasted probably if I just run away. So I have to be able to survive that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the decisions all Winston players face. It's like, okay, I've jumped on this player, I've gotten them weak. I can either now get out of my bubble and try to finish them off, or just kind of hope a teammate does. But now giving him, I think it kind of goes back to more like that player, agency that you were talking about, being able to kind of take over the game, being able to finish it off. This nano boosted Ryan, this will never get old. Just seeing Reinhardt nano boosted, just swinging. I'm sure it makes the fans out there happy that I know that was a Dragon Blade, a Gelton Genji he was able to take out. It's kind of the bane of existence of a lot of people. But this looks like, I guess, the second checkpoint, right? So this will unlock the interior
of Grand Central Station.
Oh, this is awesome. So it goes in. So the payload kind of goes in station and kind of curves around, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And you can see the payload is driven by an Omnic, who is a little Easter egg to our production director on the team. Our executive producer.
So he got a name.
Yes, Chaco.
He's gonna be a fan favorite. Oh, he's even got it on the back. I didn't realize. I thought it was like an unofficial name. Like, oh yeah, Chaco. No, he's got the suit.
Our executive producer, so he's helped us out a lot, and it was only fitting. He has
he's lived in New York as well, so he helped out a lot on this map.
So,
and we have countless debates about the right type of pizza with him as well.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I mean, New York style pizza is the dominant pizza. I believe it's the water, but that is probably for a different stream.
Yeah, do you really want to get into this?
My thoughts on the water in New York creating the better pizza dough. You also notice, at least I notice, the new sounds, especially when Ashe shoots. That is something that it was discussed at BlizzCon Line, but I think it's different to kind of see it in action, and also to see all of the other players at the same time with those audio changes. It just makes the game feel even more realistic.
Yeah, the sounds can get really punchy, and it just feels good to hold the trigger down with these different heroes. But you also get more information from it. So we've spent a lot of time not just developing what these sounds are, but how they play in different environments. So we've kind of upgraded the entire sound system across the game. So let's say when that Ashe is in a side room firing from that room, you really kind of understand where they're at and what type of environment that they're in better than you did before. And then you can kind of take that information and make different decisions or additional decisions because of it.
All right, so we got a map complete from the offense here. Not bad. Not bad in their first go. The players are so competitive. I have to say this to the stream, that we were like, yeah, this is fun. Like, everybody have a great time. And then everyone's like, put your SR in the chat. We're gonna make balanced teams. Like, who's playing what? It's just, I feel like it's just the nature of Overwatch, right? Like, it always starts off, yeah, let's play for fun, and then you lose a game. And you're like, all right, like everybody pick it up. Like, let's change things.
It's like that meme when you're playing, relaxing in your chair, and then you lose, and you lean forward, get a little more, get the game-winning posture.
It's those nights of ranked where you lose like 2, and you're like, you win 1, and then you're like, all right, play to lose, and then you lose a few more, and then the next thing you know, you wake up, and you're like, well, why'd I do that? Like 500 SR down the drain. That's so this will be an opportunity to see, like, Roadhog has a solo tank coming in for the offensive side here. I feel like he's just going to be, even on live, right? He just takes up so much space, Geoff. Like, and he takes up space not with a shield, but like just his body. As I say that, we have a Zarya swap. But talk to me a little bit about like the thoughts on how like the Roadhogs of the world, Divas, even Zarya. I know there's some interesting stuff with Zarya as a solo tank.
Yeah, so like I said before, a lot of this is still work in progress. We're still sort of addressing hero by hero. But like, because once we started going to one tank, it was sort of the big question was like, kind of what direction are we pushing tanks now? We're trying to make Roadhog, a lot more static defensively and have, big barriers or something to protect his team, or do we want more the opposite? We're like to take the Reinhardts and the Rissas and Sigmas and actually give them some more aggression and be a little more like Roadhog and D.Va. And so we definitely opted for that latter route after playing, because it's like, not only is it just more fun to have that kind of extra speed and aggression, but a lot of what people had a lot of comments on in the past, when the metas get too full of barriers and shields, and honestly even sometimes when there's just the one Orisa blocking you with just the chain shields, and it's just like, people had comments like, I just feel like I'm shooting shields all the time, like we were definitely hearing all that, and you could see some of the balance changes we made in the past in the live game. I've been trying to address this, but once we got into this situation, we're like, this is sort of an opportunity actually here to reduce a lot of these effects, and we still want them to be there and present and be important, and you can still block huge abilities. They still have a decent amount of health, but less than they had before. But then in response to that, you can see Reinhardt here. He hit the wall right there. He didn't cancel it, but you can cancel your charge, and you can get two fire strikes. So the canceling charge is one of those like sneaky things that seems like to some people might be kind of a minor change, but it almost like completely changes how he plays in a lot of ways. It's actually really fun because you can, it has a really fast recovery when you cancel, so you can like charge up to a group and then cancel and immediately ult and just like knock everyone down. So the fact that you can even do that is its own now like sort of mini game that people play, where you can kind of bluff with it. If people know you have your ult or think you have your ult, you can just charge right at them, and they're trying not to get stunned. Like, they don't want to fight you necessarily like normally, because they don't want to get earth shattered. So sometimes you can like bluff people and they're running for cover and you didn't even have it, or you save it or something. So, and it also just allows him to get in there and be more aggressive without sacrificing his health bar.
It just sounds like another change, almost like how you kind of mentioned like stuff like that Winston combo, kind of as you're playing and testing and seeing all these different things, like where the Winston combo you can load up that secondary fire, come to, like get the jump damage, land on somebody, take them out. Like now you kind of have like this like little meta game with like Reinhardt play, right, where now you kind of have like this another layer of canceling the charge, being able to I remember there was one clip, I think, from BlizzCon Online, and just like a trailer where he charges towards the team, cancels, and then shatters them all. Being able to make plays like that just seems so sick.
He's also got the ability to control his charge more, so you can actually turn around corners more. So the charge, while you can cancel, it's also more aggressive and it's more versatile. I think something else that's really interesting, if you look at if people have noticed what's happening with Zarya, is she has 2 charges to her bubble now.
But they share charges is the trick. It's actually what we playtested in the April Fool's patch. So as people probably noted, like some of those changes a lot of them were just silly, kind of fun, like permanently flying Sigma. But there were some changes we threw in there. I was like, let's see how people react to this. I'm curious what people think. Like, maybe this is something we can try. And the Zarya bubbles is one of those things. So.
Aaron,
it's something we just recently kind of put in,
right?
Oh yeah.
It took me a while to get used to the new changes, but once I really dug in and settled with these changes, I realized it's how I always wanted to play Reinhardt this way, basically. The charge in and
we were joking about that the other day, where I'm like, the canceling the charge just feels so right that but you're so like trained to kind of how it is, like where you're just charging into walls, right? That I was like, I don't have to do this anymore.
No.
Like I can just go. Like it's such like a great quality of life change.
Yeah, something else I think that's really interesting here is this fight's been going on for a while. Neither tank has fallen. And the support had been doing such a good job at keeping the tanks up, because there's only one of them that they have to actually focus on, and the fights feel really, really good being the tank player now. Like the amount of times you get into this situation where it feels hopeless. You're low on health. There's a bunch of the enemy players focusing on you, and you're able to still come out of it. It feels so incredibly good, and you feel really powerful.
Yeah, it's I think that has to be something that you guys have kind of gotten in feedback, that from a support's point of view, you're able to dump resources into just one tank, and that also probably frees you up to do a little bit of other stuff, right? Where Batiste can do a little bit more damage. You know, Zen, you can kind of orb the tank and then focus on the damage. That probably has to be way easier in supports now.
For sure. Yeah, we got a lot of feedback from support players. It's a lot easier to focus, and a lot of times you almost have this like communication between the two support players, and you know, you have like Mercy's like, I'm just going to be, you know, on tank duty and just be on tank basically the whole time, and you have like a Lucio or something like that to spot heal everybody else and speed everybody up. But there's other strats. Like sometimes we've seen people go too big heal, you know, main healers essentially, and try to just focus so hard on their tank that even with like Discord orb on them, it's just hard to kill them. So that's going to be an interesting strat too. So I'm not even sure like what the quote-unquote meta is entirely yet, especially because we're changing things all the time. I guess it's pretty hard for them to settle, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
This Zen UI is new.
Oh yeah,
it actually looks really cool. This is something obviously that's incredibly new. I think on live, like it's kind of displayed on the right.
Yeah, we're generally looking through this.
Go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
I was saying we're generally looking at anywhere we can improve hero-specific UI stuff like this, and we felt like this could use, you know, a big update and be a lot more readable.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm most excited about with the healer UI is it's not just on Zen, but it's on Mercy also. You see the portrait of the player that you're healing. And so it's just a lot easier to kind of figure out who you've got instead of just using something like a nameplate, you know.
And it's not off to the side, right? It's like center screen, so you're able to still kind of focus down the middle.
Yeah, and you can see his Discord is down there as well. So you have like Harmony and Discord orbs are kind of both shown on each side of the ult at the bottom of the screen.
We have an overtime here. I can imagine the comms are... everybody's starting to get pretty sweaty now. We get towards the end of the map. So this has really been, I gotta say, for you guys probably, this is probably awesome to see, like the game actually being, it's one thing I think to play, but now to like observe and be able to watch, and obviously, you know, the people you guys work with every day, this has to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it definitely is. We've been playing it in this state for a long time too, and it's always so tough to play a game a certain way at work and then go home and it operates in a totally different way, and you're playing with people online and you can't help but think like, if only you knew like, what I was playing, you know, every day. And so it feels really good to have that out in front of our community so they can kind of see what we've been doing.
Yeah, actually a ton of like small changes in here too. Like I'm curious if people picked up on after one game. Like one example of a small change that actually we may end up removing, but it's in this build right now, is because we've had it for a while now, but we just had reduced discussion. Maybe we want to pull it again. Is we've actually slowed the movement acceleration rate of everybody in the game just very slightly. And the reason for that was to try to create a little more sort of prediction element to shooting an enemy, as opposed to like you can kind of, you know, AD spam a lot of times, or just like turn directions so fast that it was really hard to lead a shot, or, you know, sometimes it felt like you're guessing a little bit on which direction they're going to go. So we tried to like just notch it down just a little bit, so you can't really feel it as much in first person, but it's kind of one of those subtle things. But after sitting with her for a while, even just like I think it was like last week or earlier this week, we started bringing up a thread again. Like, do we want to keep this? Actually, this has been around for a while. Is everyone still happy with this? So that's just an example of like the
controversial. Like among the design team, there's a lot of back and forth on this one. So, but I think whether or not we keep a change like that in the game, I think what it speaks to is the amount of systems and how deep we're looking at like the entire experience of PvP in the game.
Yeah, it seems like no stone on PvP is being left like untouched, right? Where you're able to kind of look under kind of every rock, you know, see what you guys want to do. I want to bring somebody in from the community real quick. I can welcome in Stylosa. Dude, what'd you think? First looks, what'd you think, man?
I'll be honest, I was a little bit skeptical when I first heard about 5v5. You know, rip to the off tanks kind of thing, but I don't know. Based off watching that first map there on New York. I don't know. It looks quite spicy. This does. Could be quite good.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. Like, as somebody who I will wait in the DPS queue, you know, as long as I gotta wait, you know. But now, like, seeing the tanks and seeing how aggressive you can play and, you know, push the pace, I'm excited to be able to kind of now dive into the tank role, and also when I'm support, you know, to throw a few heals on my tank and then start pumping out some damage, you know.
Yeah, I mean, well, super buff tanks, you're just gonna go in, right? This is yeah, it's always been the dumb thing when you're playing Reinhardt, right? You don't want to charge in most of the time, but now it's like, yeah, just go in.
Yeah, now I'm going full throttle. I'm charging back in. We can bring Aaron and Geoff back in. As our next map's going to be a game mode that we saw at BlizzCon in 2018. It seems like forever ago. Is push. How has the game mode changed since we last saw it?
We haven't made a lot of changes to the mode itself, at least as far as like the big rules go for it, but we've continued developing for it. So we have more than one push map in development, and I think we have more than one that we'll even be looking at today. So we're really committed to the mode, and we have a lot of fun playing this thing. I think the interesting thing about push to me is from the outside, it sort of looks like it's a riff on payload, but there's something about having this robot move back and forth in the map that makes this very special. I almost think of push more as a moving control point, or a match of control more than a match of payload, and you'll kind of see it. The mode can be really flanky. So there's a lot of other heroes in here that I think can get play in push. And a lot of that has to do with just the bi-directional nature of that robot in the map, and also because of how quickly it moves.
Yeah, now if you've never seen push before, there's a robot in the middle. Both teams will come out and kind of fight for it. And then once you get control, you can start pushing your barricade towards the opponent's spawn. It's the name push, guys. Stylosa, you played it at BlizzCon. How'd you find it then?
I mean, it seems like such a long time ago when I played this at BlizzCon. Yeah, it was pretty hectic. I mean, I will say, though, the teams were horrendously unbalanced at BlizzCon. And I mean, I think I had like Siegel, XQC, Fran, and me were playing against random people. It was a massacre.
That's cruel.
I'll be honest, I was just AFK. It didn't really matter. But yeah, it was. I can't wait to see it. I just, hey, any Overwatch 2 news, give it me. I'll consume that stuff. Just give it me.
How do you guys think it feels now in 5v5? Because the last time we saw push at BlizzCon, the PvP was 6-on-6. Does it play any different, you guys feel, especially on Toronto?
A little bit. So push has always been maybe our most hectic mode, or our most dynamic game mode. And part of the reason for that is the way these maps are designed is we have a very sort of like wavy path that the robot travels on. So the objective is kind of always moving back and forth. And then we have a lot of very direct routes across the map that the players can take. And because of that, it allows players to take a lot of shortcuts, circle around the enemy team, and it creates a lot of these flanking opportunities. With 5 players, there's just one less person you kind of have to kind of keep in your mind's focus and kind of like worrying about where they're going to show up at any time. And so it's settled down a little bit. I still think it has that dynamic nature that we've always loved about push. It's just a little bit easier to kind of understand.
Fast-paced. I think that's kind of the way I would put it. Like, you have a lot of the buildings you can go through, different types of routes you can take. I'm excited. Let's jump into map number 2. This will be Toronto. This will be push. This is the map that we actually saw back at BlizzCon. We all had a chance to play. It was awesome then. I'm excited to see some of the flanking characters. You can kind of get like an overhead view of the map now and see your tracers, your Genjis on this type of map.
Reaper is the one to watch for, I think.
Has Reaper been tearing it up?
Yeah. Really,
so is this map the same as it was back at BlizzCon? Or has there been any alterations to it?
It's virtually the same.
Yeah.
When we had the map at BlizzCon, it was definitely a work in progress, and it's still a work in progress now. But we've had the opportunity to add additional polish and art resources into the map since then.
All the maps just look so good. I know I see Stylos' face when we do the fly through, and he's just like smiling. He's just like so giddy, like it's so fun. Where I feel like push is going to add a different type of element to the game that like escort in hybrid, like you mentioned, are like the payload oriented maps, and I think push kind of plays like that a little bit. But there's so much more movement, I feel like, than both of those, and just you take so many different fights all over the map. And I also love the fact that you just can't really tie on this map. I think one of the things like about Assault is that you can, you have like these like long like battles, and then it's a draw, and you're just like, I wanted to. I mean, maybe even be okay taking a loss there, but like this, you definitely get a winner.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like game modes where the actual objective and the mechanics help pace out the speed of gameplay, and it was really, really hard for us to do that with 2CP. You can have incredibly long matches in 2CP and sometimes like really quick blowouts, and it just came down to what the two teams were doing, and the game mode itself wasn't really doing anything to enforce that the way it might in Control or in Payload. And so with Push, we have more of that, to where the game mode is actually helping to control the length of the match and the pace of the match.
Yeah, as you see on the clock, it's a 8-minute clock right now. So yeah, it is pretty fast. I think it's definitely intended with some of these flames in mind, as poor Lumpy gets taken out right off the rip. Lumpy was going on one of those flanks, didn't turn out so well. So does the bot unlock right away?
It takes about 30 seconds for it to unlock, and the reason we do that is we don't want a team to think that there's a certain amount of pressure, or to have all this pressure to get to it as quickly as possible. We want you to be able to be strategic with the way that you approach the bot in the middle of the map, and it's very similar to the way that Control works.
So we can see the robot. He's got a name, right?
Yeah, his name is TWO.
That's good. We see some Genji play in action. You see like all the buildings you can kind of come from, players up above to the side. I think you can definitely see that like fast paced. It looks way more like you can, as a DPS player, just kind of go off to the side, make a play, try and make a. You see here they're going right for the supports.
Yep. Yeah, and the map, there's still a main path in Push,
yeah.
And it's really important for us to have that in all of our map types. But there are a lot of ways to get around that and to get through it, and that's what creates a lot of these opportunities.
Going for the remet kill. Can't blame him.
Yeah.
I'm watching this. Yeah, I'm here. I'm fixated on the gameplay. I think, this looks really deathmatchy. This does. Like, we're just, they're just going in, they're having a good old brawl, and then obviously as the mech or the point is moving through the map, it's changing up every single time, and it's just, to be honest, it looks fairly similar to what I played back at BlizzCon all those years ago. Just with one less tank. It's just but it's just more space, I think, to operate. Yeah.
Like I'm somebody who I play a ton of DPS, and I'm excited that maybe not everybody will run around in like a death ball, and I'll be able to kind of like play Tracer and go off to the side and make a play. I noticed too the green health over Lucio here.
Oh yeah.
What is that on the UI now?
I actually completely forgot about that. There's so many changes.
I was like, sound barrier doesn't give green health when I do it.
Right. So that's something we're changing up. Like everything is work in progress. It's possible to change, although we're pretty happy with it right now. This is a change to what we kind of call overhealth. This is like a larger system, which is, in Overwatch 1 you can have over armor and over shields, depending on who's giving it to you, much like you can have normal health and shields and armor. So, once we started getting into trying to create clarity and make sure the game's very readable in all these senses, like you mentioned with Zenyatta's UI and everything, that came up too. Is like, you know, it's possible to get, especially you get into like PvE talents and stuff like that. Your health bar can get really colorful really fast. Like you could have, you know, health and then armor and then shields and then over health, armor and shields, and you could literally have 6 segmented colored health. And it was like, I can't even understand what I'm looking at right now. This is like so insane. So we ended up condensing all of the over health concepts into just one concept now. And so, you know, it was kind of interesting. Other than Summer's EMP, over shields was more of a thematic thing than anything, because it didn't regen like normal shields, because it's over health doesn't have a regeneration value. So it was kind of nonsense anyway, honestly. So now we kind of have everything condensed into green health, and it's very understandable that, you know, you see somebody with green and you can see like, okay, that's not, you know, that's over health, it's either going to drain, or if I shoot through it, they can't be healed and stuff like that. So it kind of helps clarify all that.
Port 2's getting a workout going back and forth, but I noticed before there was like a circle. So is there like kind of capture points, like progress? Does that change the respawns at all? How does that work on push?
Yeah, it does. So the robot starts in the middle of the map, and it pushes those those red barricades in front of it, and you can use those to kind of like in world see what your high watermark is. And if the robot's able to push it to the checkpoint, it will unlock a forward spawn room for the team that was able to do it. You can kind of see it just off to the left here behind Reinhardt. So if the attacking team can push it over there, they'll unlock that spawn point, and it gives them a big advantage in order to kind of push through the rest of the map.
And then I assume when they're when 2 starts moving the other direction, I guess it'd be decides to start moving the other direction, they would lose that forward spawn, right?
Yeah, but there is there is an additional detail there. It's TWO has to be pushed back to the middle of the map before you lose your forward spawn room. And we actually started it the way that you described it, but a lot of times the robot could cross this one checkpoint and it got like really chaotic and you'd have no idea where you were going to spawn. So we kind of gave you a grace period in there. Or made it a little bit stickier by forcing him to return to the middle.
Yeah, that's a good call. I can imagine if that was the case now, yeah, you would have like, if I spawned this 1 second, I would spawn close, and then like Stylosa spawns the next second and he's far away.
Yep. And I mean, that happens in Overwatch, you know, but it was way too blatant.
This
with
double
that.
bubble Zarya is sick.
She is incredible. I love her.
It's actually a pretty recent thing we checked it in, but it's pretty new.
Is her damage ramped up when she's charged? Like more so than
yeah. So you have the same bubbles you had before, but they're both using shared charges. So yeah, we found that because this increased flexibility in how you use it, she tends to be at higher charge more often. I mean, this is a good example, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's actually even a lot of playtests. I can find myself like, you know, sending a message to people. Well, what was your average energy? Would you say, or how often? It's like, you were kind of tearing it up. That seems a little insane. So, balancing TBD, but
it looks so fun though. I mean, as somebody who loves to play Zarya, like I also can imagine the people that I would play with on Zarya would just automatically double bubble themselves and everybody else
think, actually, for themselves. Like, let's just run in and double bubble ourselves. But then you start to think like, actually, if I save 2 and, you know, Genji pulls out his blade on my team, I think if I double shield him and I save that up, that's going to be kind of ridiculous.
I didn't even think of that. Like, not just applying the 2 bubbles to yourself, but you could, because they share the charge, you could theoretically like bubble a Genji blade and then bubble him again, right?
Yeah.
Or a Pharah ult.
Oh yeah,
works really well.
So many different ways.
Yeah. So this is like, as I just kind of recently put in, coming off the back of the April 1st stuff and seeing how we feel about it, and it's been pretty interesting. I'm certainly concerned about it in some cases, but it also leads to some really awesome play. So kind of letting it rock for a while and see how it feels.
Work in progress, but I like the progress on that one design. so OT, how does the rule here work? I guess do they have to push all the way to the end, or do they just have to beat the time of the blue team?
They just need to beat the time of the blue team. So the win condition for push is whoever has pushed it the furthest by the end of time wins, or if you're able to push it all the way to the end of the map, you'll win instantly. So now they're unlocking their forward spawn room right here.
The tragedy strikes for the blue team. Yeah, they need to stay near the robot, I believe, to keep pushing.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And so you can have, you know, the good old blunder where everybody walks off the objective and two just looks on sad.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's a bad.
Yeah, I imagine these games go right down to the wire.
I mean,
just as we
it's
saw
definitely hectic there towards the end. This is going to be quite good for Overwatch League, I'd imagine. This is... I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed watching that.
Yeah, I think, Stylos, I think to your point, like, yeah, when you think about, like, you know, 5v5 or 6-on-6, you're like, oh, well, like, does it still have that, like, you know, big, like, energy, like that fast-paced, like, kind of, and you see it there, I think, especially on push. I think it's why it's such, like, a great representative of the game, is that, yeah, you still have these fast-paced fights. You know, you're able to, you know, make plays all over the map.
It sort of ramps up, right, as the match goes on. It gets more and more and more intense, and oof, you have a big sort of crescendo towards the end. That's really nice. I really like that.
It's got that Overwatch music where it kind of adds to the the suspense of it all.
Yeah, and push, this happens in push a lot. It goes to overtime more often than it doesn't. And it was a decision that we made when we were developing the mode, where we had to decide what was more important for push. Was it for one team to be able to get the robot all the way to the end of the map? Or is it more important for the robot to be moving back and forth in the map? Because it's really hard to get both of those. And so we think that this mode plays better to have it moving back and forth more often. And so the mode mechanics and the map design is all kind of tailored to have that. And it makes it like really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's just the fast-moving, fast flow of combat, right? I think the kind of, Geoff, like in your wheelhouse, right? Like for just hero design and being able to kind of come up with these creative different things that, you know, like we saw Zarya there on push. Like, it's not a hero that you would kind of think for like an aggressive type of game mode like that, but she was like, she looked unkillable all the time and she looked crazy.
She's really scary in this form for sure. And, you know, I think that's kind of what we're thinking for a lot of these, you know, sort of off-tanky kind of characters before, you know, Roadhog and D.Va. And we saw D.Va there played as well, and D.Va's gotten a lot of changes too. So I think it's worth noting that we're not like taking every tank and just making them super aggro. In some cases, we're pushing some of the more aggro tanks and making them a little tankier. So, I mean, a lot of cases they have a lot more health, as people notice, but D.Va has a lot more sort of matrix juice in the can, so she can use it a lot more. So that's an example of where we didn't just like give her more missiles or something like that and let her go kill everybody. It's like she can actually protect her team a little more. So she slides a little bit closer towards, you know, the defensive route.
There's probably players out there who want those missiles, but I'm happy. I'm happy that's not happening. But Stylosa, final thoughts, man. Excited to have you on. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I am very impressed with that. Much more impressed than I thought I would be. It's been so long since I've seen push in action, and it definitely looks better 5v5. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's I want to see more. I want to see more of this. Like, you know, I feel hard done by just getting one game. You know?
Yeah, Stylos is not going to leave the call. He's just going to plant his stake down and just hang out. But guys, we're going to go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Super's going to join the show, give his thoughts on some of the things he's seen, go over some of the stuff that's going on with the tanks. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
From above. It's just a scratch. You'll be fine. You're powered up. Get in there.
My power.
Translocate. Nerf this!
I can do this with my eyes closed.
Forward barrier!
Damn it!
Огонь по готовности!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Overwatch 2 PvP developer livestream. I'm Mitch Leslie, and already we've seen a ton of what is in the works for Overwatch 2 PvP. There's a lot to take in, obviously, with new maps, new game types, and changes, of course, to some of the core mechanics of the game. So we're going to rehash a couple of things, of course, over the next few maps, but we want to drill down on a couple of the things we've already talked about so far. And to help me do that now, we'll be joining our Overwatch League superstar, Matthew Super Delissi, of course, is everybody's favorite neighborhood main tank. How you doing, Super? Obviously, big news today. I'd love to get some of your initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. I mean, the tank changes, that's definitely the one that, kind of stuck out to me. The fact that, only one tank, because I'm a tank player, and, my experience with tank, it goes up, it goes down. Sometimes you get bullied as a tank with two. So I'm curious to see how that's going to progress and change to make it so that it's a lot easier for one tank to be, work properly and not have as many struggles.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think you watch any sort of tank player's stream right now. You can sort of see plenty of the ups and also some of the downs here. Obviously, we saw, maybe some more power being shifted in the direction of the tanks, right? We saw Reinhardt with the double fire strikes. He's got some more of that charge control and the Winston changes. What was your thoughts when you first saw the fact that Winston now has a bit of longer range equipment to bring to the fight?
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit interesting. I also like that they grabbed the Zarya from the experimental. I mean, at least in when I played the experimental, I thought that the cooldown needed to be shorter on that. But I like that in general, they're trying to give more power if it's going to be just one tank. Because I feel like otherwise, a lot of tanks like, Zarya and Diva, they would kind of struggle because the way they're designed right now, I feel like they weren't really, made to be played solo, if that makes sense. But now I feel like if they do the proper changes, then I think it could actually be pretty good.
Absolutely. And you saw there as well a couple of the changes. We mentioned Winston's maze. We haven't really talked about it. It's definitely part of a wider conversation that we can sort of tap into in a moment. And of course, we'll be rejoined in just a moment by some members of our development team as well to maybe add some context and field some more of these questions here. We already heard a little bit about Diva and sort of the way that she was sort of tweaked. So I want to take this opportunity to bring back in Geoff Goodman, of course, the lead hero designer on Overwatch 2, and Dion Rogers, our associate art director. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Of course, now you have a bona fide main tank player at the professional level in the room here, and Super, of course, a chance to share some of your thoughts. But gentlemen, overall, it definitely feels like the role of the tank changes vastly now in this landscape. Not only is it just one tank, but maybe some of the roles or things you're expected to do in the game may have shifted.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like, definitely in the past, it's somewhat true as well that you're definitely leading your team. But I think now you're doing it kind of by yourself, and you can really sort of pace the game out, at least for your team, exactly how you want it to go. Which, so I think some people are sort of, internally, we've had people like kind of worried about that pressure a little bit. Like, oh man, that's a lot of I have a lot of responsibility now. But I think as you start to play it and you just realize that, wow, I actually have a lot more tools to do this than before, though. I mean, I'm a lot stronger. I can actually survive these encounters a lot more, especially with healers both focusing on me now and everything. So it ends up just kind of being empowering and super fun when you get in there, especially obviously with the ability to cancel Reinhardt charge and stuff, so you don't have to overcommit. And you can poke a little bit with Winston, so you don't have to overcommit with him either. So a lot more control.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Earlier I mentioned I used to be a Brian main as well.
Nice.
And these changes. So it took me a while to get used to the changes, but I agree with what Geoff said. There's a lot more choice and tactical decisions you're making as the tank now. That it just feels fun and really good for the team.
I love that you sort of mentioned Reinhardt here as well, because I don't know if something that we maybe haven't covered at great depth so far, but because the role of the tank maybe changes, or maybe it becomes more focused now to some degree. You know, Reinhardt, obviously, we've known him to have a sort of a passive ability on live where he's less affected by some of this crowd control or knockback stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk a bit about role passives, because that's something that is, you know, is coming to Overwatch 2 and really sort of sets some of these roles apart from each other a bit more, Geoff.
Yeah, so this is a new thing coming to Overwatch 2. It's, for those that don't know, it's every role, so tanks, DPS, and support, get a passive or a set of passives related to their role. So in this case, you can see tanks have a couple things associated with them. One is they're reduced, they get knockback reduction on them, so you can't knock them around quite so easily, which thematically makes sense too, but if you're a tank player, you're playing against, you know, Lucio and, you know, whoever else, it can be really infuriating sometimes, just be flying around all the time, not be able to control your character as well. So that's one of the things they get. And the other thing they get that we've heard about tanks, especially tanks like Roadhog who don't have a barrier, is people feel like they generate too much ultimate for the enemy team, especially if you're trying to be aggressive, which is what we're trying to incentivize. That, you know, you come in, maybe you cancel charge and try to get hammer swings in there to build your ult, but like, was that a worthwhile trade-off if the enemy shot you so much that they built more ult than you did? So what we've done is shooting an enemy tank generates less ult for you, so your enemies get less ult for shooting you across the board for all tanks now. And these are obviously the values we're tuning, but you can kind of see it here a little bit. You know, depending on who you're shooting, you generate a lot less ult. And then for DPS players, the role passive they get right now, and this is something we're definitely iterating on and tuning, maybe even more aggressive than the other ones, is they get a movement speed bonus just across the board, which you can see here. You can see it's not like massive. It's not like everyone's going to be soldiers sprinting around the map or anything. But we have found so far, like, I mean, players probably attest to this too. Like, any kind of movement speed changes to anything is huge. This is why Lucio was considered sort of like, you know, mandatory for so long, because he was the only one bringing move speed. Granted, he's a lot more move speed, but so, you know, we started a little higher. We were tuning it back a little bit. We're trying to find the number here, but it's really interesting in what it allows you to do as far as even just like basic map traversal. You can just flank a lot easier, and you don't have to commit as much time to the flank and to get back. But also, like, there are times where, let's say you're like Reaper or something, and you commit your resources to get at an enemy Zenyatta or something, and he's trying to run around a corner just get away from you, and, you know, you can just catch him. I mean, give it a little bit of time, you'll just get up close to him and you know, close that gap. So that's pretty powerful, even though it's kind of a little subtle there. And then the support changes is, this is probably something that Ana mains especially are going to love to hear, but the support players all get automatic health regen after a certain amount of time of not taking damage, which is basically Mercy's passive.
That's great.
Right, exactly. So it's Mercy's passive, but a lot less of a degree, and Mercy's passive will still exist as like a much stronger version. But this is still there, so I always feel like you're an auto player. You know, obviously when you're really low, you're like, I guess I'll nade myself. But sometimes you're missing like 50 health, and you're like, am I going to waste my nade just to heal myself? Where's my other healer?
Usually
like,
the other healers are in front of you as well, so like they have to turn around to see you.
Right. Exactly. So that's been really awesome, especially for us designing new heroes, because I feel like we're in this position every time we design a new healer. It's like, okay, well, we have to come up with some mechanic that they can heal themselves, because it's like ridiculous that you can't, like, you know, shoot yourself in the foot or whatever. Is always on a joke, but so now they have these sort of like, we don't have to worry about that anymore unless we wanted to add something like in Mercy's case or even Zenyatta's case for shields. Shields regenerate on top of this, so you'll actually get double regen if your shields are regenerating. So those heroes still retain their sort of extra regeneration bonuses, but it's a lot nicer for Ana.
Now, of course, on the horizon, we're going to be showing more of our new maps here in Overwatch 2. But something I noticed that kind of snuck past us here, some footage of Mei. So, because Mei seems like she's been changed pretty drastically, at least in terms of how she operates.
So this is actually kind of the tip of the iceberg, and some changes I can talk about. But Mei was the first one we sort of checked into the build and wanted to play with for a long time. So if you notice here, she doesn't actually fully freeze the enemy here at all. She still slows them, but she doesn't never go to a stun all the way.
Thank God.
The compensation, of course, is does a lot more damage. So it's it's really scary to be getting hit by her because you're taking damage and you're slowed. But of course, there's a lot of ways to escape. You can have help and everything, but you never actually get in that lockdown state and be like, okay, well, here's the free headshot. I guess I'm dead. And for her, it's really interesting too because she still has, at least right now, she still has that sort of cleave effect, the piercing that can hit multiple targets. So and you're doing so much damage now. It's kind of fun to play this game and try to get all this extra damage because you could straight up just kill people now by piercing through a tank or certainly if Zarya's ulting or something like that, you can just pierce through everybody and just kill them yourself. So it's kind of an interesting, still has an interesting back and forth with her secondary fire as well. But as I mentioned, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg because what we're really playing around with, and this isn't actually in this build, this is something we've been experimenting with, hasn't quite been successful enough to quite put it in the build yet, but this is something we're looking at, is just generally looking at crowd control across the whole game. Like, where do we want it to be? Who should have it? Because we've gotten feedback over time. We totally understand and respect, like, sometimes you're playing against, the ultimate CC team with like May and I don't know, McCree and whatever, and especially as a tank, I'm sure you're well aware of this. And you're just like, oh my god, I hate my life. So we've been experimenting with like just generally setting guidelines. Like, okay, tanks should probably have CC. They're all about space control, and they have that role to be able to earth shatter or create that those great opportunities. But should as many DPS heroes have CC as May? Maybe McCree doesn't need a stun, and so we're looking at all of these, especially mostly actually really the DPS and the supports. Currently, like, again, this is all like really hot off the presses because it's not even in this build, but we're probably thinking that like Ana's pretty cool right now. People are generally pretty cool with her sleep. There's a skill shot element involved.
You can give me one
There's
more sleep
a lot of
if you want.
Just keep going. How about like a fan of sleep darts? It just kind of hits everybody. You're giving me cool talent ideas, actually. So like that, we're still playing. That one seems pretty cool, but like McCree, probably not so cool, even though he's sort of like ingrained on McCree as a stun. That's like what he's about. But it's like, okay, well, what if he didn't? What if he had something else? Or what if it worked a different way? And of course, that almost has as many ramifications as the tank changes, because it's like now we're talking about, okay, we take all the CC away, Tracer, Doomfist, Wrecking Ball. These heroes are just like out of control now, right? Because like they're sort of heavily countered by CC. So then we got to go back and change those heroes, of course, as well as the compensation for the CC heroes. So that is something that's like heavily in progress, and I'm hopeful that I think we'll be able to get some reductions in there. I'm sure. I think a lot of our fans would like to see it. So trying to, a lot of these changes, including the tank changes, are trying to get back to like, core shooter roots.
It definitely feels like, Geoff, we were at points we were wondering, like, is this game like a MOBA? Like, how important is that positioning, the tactical, the ability usage element? How important is the shooting element? It's not uncommon for for developers to say this game's all it's about the gunplay, but as the game evolves and you have these ideas and you bring these new abilities in, that it can sort of change that. Super. Usually, mate, it's hard to get you to stop talking, but you've had a moment to absorb some of this. Let's talk about how you think the role of the main tank or tank in this regard is going to change in maybe an Overwatch 2, and sort of some of your thoughts about where the CC is going. How's it going to feel? You have a rock hard mental, dude. Like the way you sit on that stream and you just go. But tell us how you think this sort of changes.
Yeah. So that was kind of a big worry of mine, was like, you say one tank, and I'm thinking current Overwatch where you're playing against a Brig and then an Ana and then a McCree and a May, and then you're stun locked for 17 seconds, then you want to alt F4. But if they're if it is looking at the rest of the CC in the game, and you're looking to reduce that across the board, and then on top of that you're adding more utility to tanks, I think that's it's going to make it easier to do that, because I have felt that CC is kind of it's a little out there sometimes. It's not always the most fun to play against, and especially for me, I always felt that displacement CC was almost more egregious than like stuns, because like if you get booped by like a Lucio and like a Brig whip shot or a ball that can like swing back and forth, I always felt that was more like annoying and frustrating to play against, because you couldn't really control that. Like you kind of just got knocked everywhere, and that was just the way it was. Are those being like looked at as well as stuns, or is it like everything across the board?
Yeah, definitely. But the nice thing is we have this new tuning knob of the tank passives to say, if we still want Lucio to be able to boop enemies off cliffs or something and still leave that strong, but we still think tanks are being booped too much, we can just dial that like knockback reduction up a little bit for the tanks, so they're less affected by it. So it's a nice place to be.
Absolutely.
All right, that's nice to hear.
I mean, yeah, we're drilling down pretty heavily into like what it means to be a tank player, and I think talking about it is good, but I kind of want to see some more of it in action. I mean, Dion, I can see it here on the little preview screen, but our next map is really incredible, and it really captures, I think, the vivacity and vibrance of a region of the world that's really known for it. Talk to us through this map that is Rio.
Yeah, so Rio, another map we wanted to do for a long time. We have several artists on the team that spent a part of their life there, so it's pretty fun to kind of dive in and see this Overwatch version of Rio, the beautifully painted favelas, colorful, vibrant club. You get to visit where Lucio's club is. The team loves going to Brazilian barbecue, so one of the spawn rooms is a Brazilian barbecue place. It's another map. We're just having a lot of fun creating different details and this aspirational version of this location for Overwatch 2. And it's a brand new payload here too. You guys saw earlier, it's a pretty fun carnival float. So we're just having fun with these maps. In the cool Brazilian barbecue. It's fun and sunny and colorful. And I think it's a map that feels like Overwatch when you play it,
I mean, already that sort of signature vibrance that so many of Overwatch's maps have been credited for is there. Can you obviously, I don't want you to give away too much of the story, but is there a context here, like where are the attackers starting from? Because I see some beach, I see different landscapes sort of getting fleshed out here as we go through the map.
Okay, so the defense actually starts in Lucio's home. So yeah, obviously there's a story layer to Overwatch that we want to tell, so Lucio plays a big part of that. So you get a little hint of where we're going with that, but we're not talking too heavily about it. Also, Lucio's club is it's kind of a community place, so it's a place, if it was real, people can come there for free. He's a community guy. We wanted to showcase this with this gigantic kind of sci-fi club he has. Yeah, it's connected to the story of Overwatch. We'll just have to wait and see how closely Rio plays into the game. You saw a little bit at BlizzCon a while ago, but there's definitely more.
Right, so
I do have a question for Geoff. Sorry to cut you off, Mitch, but I do have a question if that's fine. So I'm pretty sure like way back in the day, there was like an interview that I read that was like 5 was too small and 7 was too big for the roster limit, and then 6 was perfect. But like I'm kind of curious, like where along like the Overwatch timeline did that philosophy kind of change? Like was it role lock? Was it like people learning how to play the game better? Like you know what I mean?
Pretty much all of this. Yeah, I mean, we know so much about the game. I mean, as kind of Aaron touched on at the beginning, like before everything, and you could just play 5 Winstons. In fact, we had an internal tournament where that was the strategy. 5 Winstons and a Zenyatta. It was sort of like, oh my god, this seems like maybe a problem, or is this cool? We don't know. So, like, obviously, when you're building really any game, you try to make the best judgments for what you have and what you're playing, but once you have the game in the wild and get it in everybody else's hands and it marinates for a while and you're making changes, like, your opinion on this stuff definitely changes. So I think over time, like it was touched on, we were still keeping an open mind to maybe doing some of these kind of changes, and then coming Overwatch 2, we were just like, let's revisit everything, and that was definitely one of the major core decisions of Overwatch 1 we were really looking forward to revisiting. And at that point, we were just like, yeah, maybe this is actually just much better. Maybe we were wrong all along. Although, the people always say, it's kind of a design thing, people say, you're not necessarily wrong at the time just because you were wrong in retrospect. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So obviously this is a hybrid map. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning here. So much in the same way as King's Row, we'll be fighting for control of a payload here, which will eventually roll on out. And we kind of teased, these payloads. This is, I mean, I'm no stranger to peacocking. Look at what I'm wearing. But this is great. Obviously, we tell a story in Overwatch in Overwatch 1 with these payloads here. So looking forward to seeing how that story gets fleshed out. What I'm seeing already is real difference in map geometry, right? As we move into the second phase, all of a sudden it's less about chokes and overpasses, and it's just this jumble of all these buildings and so much high ground here. Really felt like the way you play the map changes drastically here.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Oh, that was just one thing. We're trying more of this phased approach with the visuals and the gameplay as we move through the space. So you saw it was a bit more open. As you get the payload, there's a feeling of changing gameplay and art as well. So this visual progression as well as gameplay is much more clear in some of the newer maps we're working on.
Yeah, one thing that maybe it's just a coincidence, but I feel like a lot of chokes in Overwatch 1, like specifically like I think like Hanamura first or like going through King's Row second, they're very like tight and like it's like perfect for like a Reinhardt shield to spread across, and it can be like, you know, a real pain to get through those sometimes because you feel like you really only have like one way to go through. But I'm seeing, at least in the other two maps that we looked at, a lot more flanks and ways to access the point, and I think that's overall better for the design because I feel like when you, especially on Hanamura first, like going through that choke is kind of, you know, it can be real not fun sometimes if you're just not clicking, or if it's just, you know, they have a hard comp that yours can't counter, and I think it's just better overall.
Yeah, we want to give players more options to solve a problem. Say they're stuck at the choke, they have a few more options to break through. Basically, they don't have to rely fully on the tank powering through this time. But yeah, that's always the thing. We're trying to improve the options the players have to solve situations.
Are there going to be previous maps in Overwatch 1 that will be reworked, or?
We don't know.
Can you not say? Is that secret?
No.
Or?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
So obviously, you've got one less hero on the battlefield. Your maps are much more labyrinthine, I guess, or just bigger, right? It's just a large, you know, there's so much more ground you could cover if you wanted to take a different approach. How do you sort of balance how big the map is, right? Because obviously there's a sense where, like, you know, if you go too far in one direction, right, it can seem quite barren. But here, like, everything, there's attention to detail everywhere, right? There's so many crisscrossing ways of approaching the point. So it doesn't feel big, but it definitely, as opposed to maps we saw in Overwatch on live right now, it definitely feels bigger, right? Was that ever a consideration, trying to balance that, the sort of size and the majesty of it all?
Yeah, it's definitely more detailed than before, and again, the more options, there's more passageways and buildings for players to move through and build strategies from. But ultimately, the maps are in a fairly similar size to the previous. You're just seeing a lot more detail out of the Overwatch 2 engine. We have a lot of cool upgrades that allow us to do more while keeping a smooth performance. But yeah, it's something we're constantly playing with, the scale of maps and how it feels to move through the space, visually as well as gameplay wise.
This really has like a Dorado feel almost, right? We have sort of payloads sort of moving through underneath, and there are multiple levels here. This is not just sort of 2 levels here. There's even more options, I guess, to sort of make use of this verticality.
Yeah, there's like a left high ground, right high ground. There's so much going on here.
Yeah. I love this point in particular. Like, taking that middle high ground is, you know, really important. If you can hold it, it's fantastic, but it's just really hard to hold because you have all these upper flank routes and under flank routes and stuff. So it ends up being like kind of a gambit to try to even take it and hold it, especially when you don't have tanks that can just sit on it with barriers all the time. But it's so powerful. You can see where Widow is right there. It's so powerful. You have this line of sight on everything up there.
So is Universal ult charge nerfed, or is it just as a result of the tank changes that it seems like people are getting their ult slower?
It's mostly just the tanks, and we don't have. They're probably, I can't remember exactly all the individual changes, but I think we probably adjusted a few heroes here and there. May have gone up or down on their costs, but it's almost entirely just the tank changes. You generate a lot of ult off tanks in our game.
Right, I guess there's one less tank to shoot as well, so it makes it a little bit harder.
Although looking at Widow is an interesting example. We haven't adjusted the snipers too much yet, but we're keeping a really close eye on them because a lot of what sort of controls snipers is the fact there's all these barriers you can't shoot through. When you're playing as Widow against a comp that is, you know, like back in the day when it was like Wrecking Ball only or something like that, like, you definitely are a lot more powerful. So we have to make sure that they don't get out of control.
I feel like on some of these choke points, it's definitely a lot more wider than some other maps, and I feel like if unchecked, some certain widows could do a lot of damage.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just yet another thing we got to keep an eye on with change like this.
Right.
I mean, we talk about how sort of tanks have changed now to sort of allow them to be more multi-purpose or sort of fill a broader spectrum of roles. Obviously, like, when you have a Reinhardt, you kind of know what the player is playing for, right? The shield creates space, right? You create space just because the shield exists. And with someone like Roadhog, they create space because of the threat of the hook, right? It's not even something that's necessarily, it's implied threat, right? It's not
exactly
sort of directly displayed. So, I mean, what is the idea for a tank? Do you still want there to be the mix of there sort of being that implied threat plus obviously a very visible threat? Has it changed the way you think about how tanks create spaces now? Obviously, all tanks have to be able to do that to some degree, regardless if they have a shield or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously also impacts new hero design, working new heroes, how they're going to interact with creating space and defending their team. Certainly looking at, Arisa's not being played here for a reason because we're looking at her really heavily. Any hero that has sort of just the really kind of heavy static slow defense are the ones we're kind of trying to hit the hardest first. And then, just that alone already makes Roadhog shine a little bit because he's not being compared to the huge barrier Reinhardt. But certainly, should have healed there first probably, but he went for it. Yeah, so like there's a lot of changes we can make now in this world that would have been really scary to make before. Especially in regards to cooldowns. So like Roadhog used to have a much faster hook way back in the day. Maybe we could bring that back, especially in a world where all the tanks are pretty aggressive, so it doesn't feel like it's super crazy. We still want to make sure there's enough like counterplay. You don't want to feel like I made him dodge the hook and then we had no opportunity to attack because he just hooked again right afterwards. So certainly a balancing act, but a lot of the tank sort of tankiness can be just in the hero themselves now. Because if you get to go in and be threatening, like with all this extra damage, and just be hard to kill, you're just creating space by existing.
What an animal.
Obviously, Super, I'm curious to get your opinion here. Obviously, as someone who plays tank, right, and you'll play, main tank as we called it, or off tank. What is it that makes you sort of feel most powerful when you're playing tank, right? Because obviously all the heroes offer something so different, each of them. But could you narrow it down to something? What makes you feel like MTD feel,
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it comes down to like decision making, right? And a lot of that currently is kind of based off of the fact of what your second tank is doing, which is obviously no longer a thing because there's a removal. And I feel like this is really gonna have to rely a lot more on like your supports keeping you a lot more alive as opposed to like your off tank or secondary tank, being in coordination with you, because the supports now, they only have to focus on one tank in particular, as opposed to having to split it between two. And I feel like that's probably gonna have to give a lot more. Tanks are gonna have to play a lot more, I guess, assertive, because they can't really rely on their other tank to make the decisions for them, or like to help them out in that way.
I feel like it definitely changed. I know, there's a good handful of players who, their selection of tank really boils down to their capacity to deal damage. Like a lot of time, like you'll see them, right? You get these weird sort of Sigma Zarya comps, or you see like a lot of people just like playing Roadhog. That's their favorite tank because he does damage. Trying to make a player feel powerful on tank without just doing damage requires you to really think much more about game design. That's what I kind of wonder. Like, outside of just doing a ton of damage, how do you sort of balance a tank to make them feel powerful without just pumping numbers into their primary fight?
Yeah, I think that's probably a design philosophy that I'm maybe not qualified to talk about.
That's convenient because I wasn't actually asking you, but you can weigh in on it first.
Okay, yeah, I'll just stop speaking. That's good. No, that's good. I'll stop speaking.
I'm curious what your opinion is. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's like we're talking about with just options, and like Super mentioned, like we just want to make sure that, I mean, that's kind of the point of the Zarya change, is just giving her more flexibility and more options. So, I mean, it happens to be she also generates a crap load more energy and is way scarier, does more damage in this case. We may have to rein that in a little bit. She was already running out in that last little bit there with like 80% and then 100%, so you can see it's pretty aggressive. But yeah, it's definitely just trying to create really interesting playmaking opportunities and just strategic thought. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of like to have the tanks exist, where it's, if you really want to just click heads, there are probably better options out there. I don't think we're likely to make any kind of like sniper tank out there or anything like that, because there's a lot of other opportunities for that. We'd like to try to keep the tanks like I was mentioning with the crowd control changes as an example of this. We'd like to keep the tanks being the ones who are primarily able to do crowd control, and that's also with only being one tank now. It means still there's going to be a lot less crowd control in the game in general, but still allow them to sort of flex that particular element.
Right, so you talk about obviously taking a little bit of that away from May, but obviously it's still something that, you feel like you could include in the game. It almost feels like it's a more moderated approach to it now, because tanks can be the ones that bear a lot of that sort of crowd control potential. It just means that there's, now it's just that one hero on the battlefield that really is able to produce so much of it outside of, 5 different forms that are coming in. So it feels like almost responsibility as a tank player is almost kicked up a notch there, because you got to be a jack of all trades in some cases.
Especially if crowd control gets reduced to a point where you're looking for to counter something specific, like you're looking for Genji blade that then is ready, and you need to, let's say you're playing Hog, you really want to land that hook when he comes in. It's a really big game changer if you land it. So sort of make sure it's up and then you save it and try to keep an eye on him. And conversely, if you're a character who is really watching for, like Reaper or something like that, wants to get his ult off, but you want to make sure you're not going to get stunned, it's a lot easier to sort of track who can stop you. You're looking for their tank and looking for, rather than looking at the whole enemy team. It's kind of like when you're Zarya trying to ult and you're watching D.Va really close because you don't want to have it eaten, and that's what you're most concerned with as far as timing goes. It's like that with more CC in general, I think.
This guy's nuts on Roadhog.
Yeah.
even with sort of less knockback, Ryan obviously being as close as he was to the whole Hog just sort of gets knocked away. I sort of remember it was almost like a tooltip text loading into game, sort of playing Overwatch. It sort of said like, listen out for footsteps. Like the heavier footsteps mean your opponent is potentially more dangerous to you. But it definitely feels like the weight of these weapons is much more effectively conveyed, right? If I'm listening here as we're sort of talking. Like that scrap gun sounds extremely meaty.
I love the weapon sounds. He's done such a great job.
And they,
especially like
Widow.
Soldier. Oh, Widow, yeah, Widow's so great.
Widow is
the sort of
insane.
like the echoing sound when you shoot in an open space. Oh my god, it's fantastic.
You really feel like you're actually wielding a very high caliber weapon, right? That actually has weight and it has a sense of kickback and sort of makes sound. And also like it, based on where you are in the map, the environment, I think this is maybe covered, I think, BlizzCon Online as well, but it really feels like the environment, we were inside, club, in Lucio's club beforehand, and that echo is really much more apparent, right? That the environment playing a big role in how things sound.
And being on the receiving end of Widowmaker's shot, it just feels so much more dangerous hearing the sound. So it helps you hide, basically.
Right, yeah.
Wow, team two.
Hide in terror.
That's a big part of it as well. Like it's not just when you fire, but getting hit by these weapons and these abilities seems like it it has more of an impact. It's not like we're giving you an earthquake in your seat, but I feel like I'm almost sort of shifting in my seat as people getting hit by stuff here as Doomfist lands punches. So much more visceral experience, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it adds so much. I mean, there's so much done to. I'm certainly not an audio guy, but I've talked to them a lot on what they've been working on. But they've been given the ability to create more accurate sounds in certain spaces. So, like an indoor tighter area or an indoor wider area can have different sounds and get that sort of sound of things bouncing off the walls. And it's so epic. And not only is it make the game feel a lot better as far as like your weapons and getting shot at, but like it actually makes the environment feel a lot better because you feel more connected, like you're actually in that space, just the way all the sounds are playing when you're in that space.
The immersion of the environment too, that's just the sounds of the environment is it's beautiful now. If we could just walk through without all the bullets.
Yeah, I mean, it's only exactly right. Not so tranquil, I guess, when you're fighting for your life with 9 other people. Superman, I mean, naturally, these are changes that, some of them you thought about before, obviously having played so much tank, and maybe you wish for some of these. And, I'd love to get some of your final thoughts here on sort of how tank is going to feel and, heading into Overwatch 2, as I'm sure you'll be strapped in and playing?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I have to get a chance to play it first, but based on what I've seen, it looks like Tang's gonna have a lot more pressure. I feel like, or a lot more of a role to play, because you don't really have that second tank to help you out and kind of help clean up your mistakes, if you will. Like if you get hooked, you get a bubble or matrix or whatever it may be. So I feel like in general, it looks like tanks are going to play a lot smarter. But you do get the plus side of having both supports only focus on you as opposed to having two. So I think it'll be interesting.
Well, we're interested to hear some of your thoughts, of course, as the live stream goes, and as we get further and further down the development roadmap, as well as some of these changes get fleshed out even more. Super. Thank you very much for joining us, mate. Obviously, I'll be seeing you soon once the Shock get back on the battlefield. But good to have you here, and we'll see you soon, man.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Super.
Thanks.
And that, of course, was Matthew Super Delissi, obviously tank player from the San Francisco Shock, and has given us some really good insights as well, maybe on how it feels for him to see these tank changes. I want to now take the opportunity to welcome to our stream, obviously, prolific streamer Cupcake. Obviously, we see you play a multitude of FPS titles, including Overwatch. Great to have you with us, Cupcake. A lot of news today.
Thanks.
We're continuing to tease more out of these devs slowly. I'd love to get some of your thoughts on what we have so far.
Oh man, I really like seeing all the new hero looks and the map visuals, and the UI updates have been really cool, especially as a support player. I'm seeing a lot of little UI updates for support heroes, and I'm really excited about them. So yeah.
Absolutely. You and me both. Obviously, I'm a support main as well, so I'm looking forward to teasing a little bit more out of our devs. Not only, of course, about maybe supports, but a little bit more about Overwatch 2, and of course, yes, we will be showing another map in just a moment. So let's take the opportunity to sort of bring these devs back in. Of course, obviously, Geoff and Dion have given us some great thoughts so far, because something that was teased at BlizzCon Online and we got to see a little bit of was actually the hero looks, right? Overwatch 2 is, it's a game that's set a little bit further sort of in the future as far as we can tell, and this is reflected in what the heroes actually look like. I don't know if Dion, Geoff, if you can sort of speak to that, because it's not just a jazzy tech upgrade, but something, we can see the passage of time being implied with some of these new looks.
Yeah, that's part of it, is the passage of time. You can see Reinhardt is a little older. I think there's a sneak peek at a few characters that there's a bit of age difference on them as well. A bunch of guys are part of Overwatch now, so they have access to cooler tech in their outfits. It's just, we're having fun kind of in a way to show these guys have upgraded their equipment. They're ready to do battle in this new world. Pharah here with their new Overwatch gear. So that she has the armor that fits the Overwatch team. And just Reaper is pretty amazing as well.
There's definitely a feeling of them looking sort of more high tech in a sense as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, I love that you kind of this is cheeky. You're kind of teasing little bits of the story or how the world changes out as we go. So that's just, building my appetite up to sort of see more about how the world is changing and what all these heroes are up to. I mean, you see, obviously, Widowmaker's got a change of hairstyle as well. Tell us about what the development process on these changes is like, because I think it was sort of mentioned that there's sort of new tech available to developers to sort of bring these characters to life, but I'd love to know how you go about refreshing or revamping or update some of these hero looks.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool, really cool engine upgrades that you could see in some of those shots. A lot of better detail. The character's skin feel more natural. Their hair has a really awesome shader, and it's still stylized, but it just feels much more real, almost like you could touch it. This is in the environments as well. There's tons of nice detail. We've upgraded the lighting engine, so shadows are better. All these things are just to make the world feel much more immersive, more dynamic, and more animated things in the world. The characters have the cool tech gear and details that we weren't able to do before until we kind of tune some knobs in the engine, and so we're subtly playing with this, maintaining Overwatch style, keeping the game performance smooth, but upgrading everything to the Overwatch 2 level.
I'm curious about the new the new upgrades to the skins and like just the heroes themselves, and you guys have all the skins from all the different heroes from Overwatch, and like how challenging it is to bring them in and like update their looks as well. Like, is that an easy process, or is it like tedious to make them all look just as good?
That's a great question. So a lot of the tech, for example, the skin shader will apply to all the older skins as well. So our engine team is working hard to kind of create a workflow that's easier for the artists, but it's still, there's a level of work there, but everything you see on these new 2.0 heroes, the updated hair shaders, updated skin, detail maps, these will all carry over to the older heroes or the older skins. So a lot of stuff looks even better than it did before.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
There's a bit of work there to apply some of the new techniques to those guys, but it's a beautiful upgrade to practically every single skin in the game. So it'll be fun for players to see.
Is it going to be possible to like add more customization like with this new technology, like unlocking different like color schemes or something like that, or like special weapon variations, even for like certain achievements or something like that, so we have more ways to customize the way our heroes look?
An amazing question, but you have to wait and see.
That's not a no.
Okay, wait.
That I didn't know. That's all.
It's not a yes either. It's not a yes either.
Oh no. What about like mixing and matching like skins and weapons? Is that going to be possible? Like using a weapon from one skin? Because like that would be so much fun. Like you get creative with that. Can you imagine? Like, oh man.
Now, I mean, we're theory crafting. You know, we're off to the races here already. I can't like this.
I'm like, so many ideas.
There's a lot of fun stuff in store. Yeah.
You do have something new to show us.
It's like my favorite part is the visual. So.
Well, speaking of which, Cupcake, Dion has a new hero to show us. Dion, do you want to talk us through this one?
Yeah.
So, this one will be, I think he's a Torbjorn.
Yep.
So this is Torbjorn 2.0. You can see he's a little older. He has a bit better technology and gear. And yeah, he's the Torbjorn we all know and love. He's just much more advanced. He has a cool...
Very cool.
You can see the hair shader really well on his beard.
But like imagine that, but with like his summer skin like weapon.
Right.
like that's the kind of stuff I want to see at some point. Like
so that, I mean, you can definitely see. I mean, some of the changes are big, right? They're vibrant, and obviously, you know, you can definitely see the passage of time into all. And some are subtle. You know, it's the patches on the knees of his jeans. It's the connectors between the hardware that he's using, the goggles that he has. And I mean, we can see this gregarious attitude from him very clearly displayed, though. I think that's very much still been brought to life.
And, you know, we want to upgrade the characters, but we don't want to lose that silhouette that's familiar to players, you know. He still looks like Torbjorn from a distance. He just looks better and more detailed up close, but he maintains that silhouette we come to know and love and like to shoot at. So that's some of the...
Extra props to the VFX team for doing some like the next kind of 2.0's VFX on his pack there. Looks great.
Right.
Smoke coming off.
Yeah, it's a serious modernization of you know, not just obviously how his skins look, but how he behaves in the game and how he interfaces with the world that he's put in. Let's shift gear here and talk a little bit more about our next map. Rome was teased at BlizzCon Online, right? We've got these beautiful panoramas, these Colosseum looking things, just like this sort of future Rome, but that's obviously coming up next, and it is a push map. So I want to talk a little bit more about how a push map is actually developed, right? The newest game type to the game gives some really unique situations to play through. Let's delve in a bit deeper. I have to assume, right, like there has to be some symmetry to the map. I'm sure is that sort of
right.
Okay, what's important when designing a push map? Let's start there.
So symmetry is obviously the number one important part. It makes it very competitive because both sides have a similar layout, but it also makes it tough to create a second one. So you had Toronto that we saw earlier where it was more of an S-curve layout to the battle. In Rome, you'll see it's kind of a C. You kind of cut through the Colosseum. It becomes tighter. when you reach the robot, once you see the players play. This one was where we really found a way, okay, this is how we make iterations on push. At first, the S-curve was an easy one to go to, it's make the map snake through buildings and things, but how do we switch it up for a different space? And we knew we wanted to make Rome. We knew we wanted to go through the Colosseum, so that's kind of part of the initial design for this version, the push map. But it's a very fun mode, especially on in Rome. I think the thematic of the scene plus pushing the robot kind of enhances how fun this game type is.
It's such a crazy juxtaposition between all the sci-fi movies that you might watch and then a location that is obviously known to us, and sort of thinking about how the passage of time might change it. I want to know, you mentioned, the first thing you mentioned, Dion, I feel like, was that like it's very competitive as a result of that symmetry. And you guys as the developer team on Overwatch have had a good chance to see how so many of these maps play out at the highest competitive level. So I'm curious to know, like, how much is Overwatch League a factor when you're sort of considering a game type or a map design like this? How often do you think, like how the players could break this, or they're gonna sort of go for the 1% plays on this kind of map? Does that factor into the dev process all that much?
I think yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Geoff could probably answer this bit.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, I feel like it's hard to imagine a player base sort of breaking a map apart probably as much as the Overwatch teams, Overwatch League teams do, and they will find that stuff fast and abuse even the smallest things. So yeah, I mean, we definitely, as far as like the specific layout, we're looking at all that stuff quite a bit, but especially when we're developing a new mode. It's very much taken into account how competitive it's going to be, and as was brought up earlier, based on the rule set, we want to make sure if we can avoid it, we want to avoid any kind of tie situation. This mode certainly prevents that. And then, as Aaron was talking about earlier, like we were debating whether or not this should be like kind of easy to push to the end, and then you get a point, and then the other team can maybe it's multiple rounds and each push is 1 point, but then it's like you get in that potential tie situation, and you lose some of that sort of epic tension of pushing it those last little bits and people fighting over those little bits of space. And so I think, I mean, we're very cognizant of that, especially with new modes, thinking about how they're going to be played and competitive.
We had so many matches that came down to 2-3 meters. This is such a fun, you feel good even lose. You're like, that was a great battle because it felt like we fought really hard for those last 2-3 meters.
This map is genetically engineered for play-by-play casters. I like that. More opportunities for us to just yell nonsense. We're going to jump in and check this one out. We've got a bunch more questions. I'm sure, Cupcake, you do as well here. But, I mean, first impression is wow. This is an incredible vista.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
Absolutely stunning stuff. We talked about, Dion, you mentioned like the S shape sort of thing, but it looks like there's some twists and turns here. It's almost like the path overlaps itself as well at some points.
It does. There's a little bit of C shape, and then there's this bridge overpass that's pretty fun to encounter. I think I'm curious to see how this battle plays out once the players get to the overpass.
We'll be starting
I feel like the two big features on this map, and we'll see it right away, is the first one is right in the under the Colosseum, basically where the the bot starts, and it kind of like looks sort of simple in basic geometry, but is like the subtlety there is because it's got a slight curve to it the whole time. It's so amazing, and you can see certain of these are blocked off and certain of them are open as far as in between the pillars, and that was actually iterated on quite a bit. I remember opening them up, closing them. In fact, you see the tops are actually open, so you can climb over or fly over them. So we still allow some flanking routes if you're like a Pharah or Genji and you want to get cheeky, but we didn't want to close it off entirely. So that one section was sort of everyone's favorite right away in playtesting, and then just a massive amount of iteration on it was great.
Right.
So we'll see it here.
That quality of life trains on Winston's bubble does not go unnoticed, by the way. The duration of the bubble remaining being shown on the HUD is huge.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
It's funny watching.
Sorry, I mean, I just love the curvature. Actually, it actually reduces line of sight, right? So you cannot now just sit at one end of this sort of track and see the other if you're a sniper. So even that small tweak, has balance implications that I'm sure you've thought about to quite a great degree. I think because me and Cupcake are both support mains, I think something we're definitely going to be wanting to talk about here is that it's not just Zenyatta's HUD that's gotten a change, right? It seems like every sport looks a little bit different when it comes to the HUD and some of those abilities that interact with teammates.
Yeah, which like even the Zen placement of the orbs, it's so much better, like more in the middle rather than having it on this side.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really nice. I've noticed like the little changes with like having Mercy, like it shows when Mercy's healing somebody a lot more clearly, and I like having the icons of who it's on, you know. I like I wish to see more with Ana. Like I would love to see with Ana having it show like who she slept, like on the UI.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah.
Like that would be so cool.
Especially because, you know, I feel like I have to tell my DPS player that's in the enemy backline, I don't know if you saw that, but I just let the fire out the air, and they just
I slept someone, yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you throw one, you don't know who it hit, like because there's so much going on. You're like, okay, I definitely slept someone, but I'm not sure who it was. That might be important to know.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part. You sleep against you accidentally with a blade, and someone just wakes them up because they have no idea that you've sort of slept them, right?
Exactly. Oh no.
And obviously, you as a player get indication if Mercy is healing or damage boosting you, right? Obviously, your screen sort of on live, your screen sort of takes on like a sort of a very slight non-intrusive glow. But it seems here you've also changed how it's indicated to you that Mercy is sort of damage boosting you. Is that also the case with like a nano boost, for example?
I can't remember if we've actually changed the 1P nano boost effect.
I don't think we have yet.
Gotcha.
I don't remember, but in general, there's like, you know, great big passes going across. I mean, really across the team. I mean, you can see the skin passes, and those emails get sent out all the time. Like, oh, look at these cool, you know, skin changes and, you know, tech we're getting. And then there's also VFX updates. Look at the VFX changes you're making and sound, of course. So it's kind of just awesome being, like, even if I'm not directly, you know, working on that stuff, just sort of seeing that stuff cross my email and the examples being sent out. It's just awesome, like day to day. Seeing all the changes.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure your inbox is sort of swarmed with them. I sort of wonder what the look. It was mentioned at BlizzCon Online as well that sort of the assault game mode sort of there wouldn't be sort of further maps developed for, right? The focus would no longer sort of be on that. So I'd love to know what the sort of thought process is between sort of the removal of assault, or 2CP as it's fondly known, and the addition of push here.
Right, so that has a long history, actually. This probably was probably most of the people who really follow the game closely are aware. We've obviously the assault map, or 2CP as it's called. A lot of people had a lot of concerns with it, and we've tried to make a lot of changes to it. In fact, what people might not know is we've gone through multiple phases of like a heavy overhaul of it, but none of them ever really were good enough to go even to experimental card, honestly. I always feel bad because one time I had a new designer join, and one of the first things we gave him was like, overhaul 2CP, what do you want to do? And it was like, the hardest problem ever, go ahead and solve it, new guy. It was like, oh, that's kind of rough, actually, in retrospect. So, you know, we've got went through a lot of changes, and it got to the point where we were like, we'd have to make so many changes to get this where we want it to be. Like, is it even the same mode anymore? And at that point, if we're getting to that degree, why don't we just make a different mode?
Yeah, let's make new.
Why even try to, like, you know, change it to that degree? So that's kind of how that ended up coming about, and a lot of it was feedback from the players.
So that's kind of spicy, Geoff. You're trying to say that there's other modes in development. Are you trying to imply that?
I would say that we are constantly experimenting with new modes. But their experimentation right now.
How crazy!
New York was.
Sorry, Dion, please.
Oh, sorry. New York was. We experimented a lot with New York before landing on the mode that we chose.
I mean, it seems like so many possibilities for that kind of map, right?
Right. Temple of Anubis, when we first showed that at BlizzCon, the shipping version actually changed. You know, to try to fix 2CP even back when the game first came out. So, we actually, the version we shared and the version that shipped with the game was pretty different from the choke point standpoint to try to address some of the 2CP challenges. So
we just left that spot in the map. Oh, sorry, Dion, I didn't cut you off.
And that was it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just going to comment on it because we were there, although they just left it. But the other thing I was mentioning about this map, because I mentioned two things, is that area we just left it's like this like corkscrew, basically. And it's super interesting. Yeah, it like goes, you basically flipped on itself and goes over itself. And you can see it coming up here. So you go under, in this case you would go to the right, and then back up and then cross over itself. It is a really interesting point to play. In fact, when we were first playing it, I remember we had our first feedback session where it was like, I don't know if I like this or not. It's either amazing or it's terrible. I can't even tell. Like it's super interesting and very impactful. And so we were like, I think that means we keep going with it, keep playtesting it, and keep iterating. So obviously having a big impact is almost more important if you can get the good stuff of it. So after a lot of iteration, it's definitely persisted and it's become kind of the most interesting spot to play around because
it's a lot of drama there.
The flanks, you can flank from on top to drop down below because you have to go under this pass. And if you just sit in the middle of that pass as Reaper or something like that and just drop down, of course you got to worry about be jumping up on you or something. There's actually a little wall on the right you can climb up right there if you're a character that can climb or grapple or something. So it's just like this. When you're going through that after playtesting this map enough and playing enough, when you're going under that pass, it's the most like anxiety-inducing spot. It's just like, especially when it's like calm for a while at first, because like after a fight and you're going, there's no sounds. You're like, okay, what is about to happen here? Where are they going to be coming from? And it's like
there's a sneaky little alleyway in there too. A tiny once you're under the bridge, there's an alleyway there. Reaper 76. There's a lot of
so it's like Gibraltar, right? You go through that first or underpass, and you just know it's a little too quiet. That someone's going to show up and clap you. I mean, I'm loving this. It looks like, I mean, the verticality difference between sort of playing in this initial sort of bend and then outside on the corkscrews is huge. Like, you'd have to sort of switch columns almost to try and make the most of it. Cupcake, we've seen now a good, decent bit of Rome. I'd love to get some more of your thoughts here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love all the like architecture and everything in it. I was fascinated when I was watching the preview during the BlizzCon line on it, and I would love to get in there and like just go explore it and look around and like figure out like what the best way to go about this is, because there's a lot to it. It's a little confusing like looking at it from like this perspective, but I'm sure once you get in there and you actually like play it, it makes a lot more sense, Even
at 5v5, yeah, you definitely have the feeling of like franticness or hecticness, sort of around the bot.
Yeah, exactly.
And this seems like a game mode that's catered to like giving these like adrenaline sort of pumping moments of overtime, right?
Oh yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of overtime moments.
What I love though is that these buildings don't just seem for decoration. Like even look up at the top right side, right? Like all these buildings you can go in. There's so many more of these nooks and crannies that you can actually explore. That seems like a way more intensive map design process as well, because you have to think of everything. You cannot leave a stone unturned when you sort of turn this tapestry into, something vibrant like this. Incredible stuff. There it is.
So cool.
Right, that was your first look of obviously at some gameplay on Rome. A beautiful map, and my God, yeah, I really think that those shot callers out there are going to have to be thinking a mile a minute just how they can take advantage of the sort of topography of the map as it sort of changes. Really exciting stuff. I mean, we already sort of got a feel for the game mode, but it's crazy just how different, I don't know if you feel the same, Cupcake, how different this feels from Toronto, even though it's the same game type, but the map sort of changes the feel and the flow so much.
It does, yeah. It definitely feels a lot different. I don't play it like a high-end like skill level, so I'm curious how it's gonna work on somebody on like my level. Like I'm like the average Overwatch player, I'm not like, top 500. I'm not GM. Like I'm plat. A lot of my Overwatch experience as a support. Like I solo queue support. Like it's the struggle is real. And so my experience is like, I have my tanks that just like Leroy Jenkins in, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I'm just trying to like keep up, So I'm curious, how that's going to go on like, as like plat games,
I mean, I'm sure I'm going to find out because I sure as heck won't be playing in any other rank than plat myself. That's what I'm going to be experiencing. Hey, really quickly,
so y'all know how I feel, okay?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're in good company. I'll make no bones about my standing in the game. That was incredible. Thank you, Geoff and Dion, for walking us through Rome. we started from that sort of vibrant sort of overlook, and then we were straight into the action. I really love just the juxtaposition of sort of the futuristic tech plus a really historic location. And that's a lot of fun. I mean, speaking of incredible locations, we actually still have one more map to show everybody. So ladies and gentlemen, stick around. There's still more to come. A new map, an in-depth look that you haven't heard anything about, coming up on the other side of this break. So stick around for more of this Overwatch 2 PvP developer live stream.
Taking the lead.
Welcome back, everybody, as we get ready for our final map of the day. Thanks to Mitch, thanks to all the other content creators that dropped by the stream. It was a ton of fun to have them. Back to the original crew, though. As I know, a lot has changed, obviously, with Overwatch 2's PvP. A lot changed with Overwatch 1's PvP throughout the eternity, but I think like this is a pretty drastic kind of change from what the players are used to at home. I guess for the players at home now, like, what can the expectations be? Obviously, like you guys have mentioned, a lot of this is still work in progress.
Yeah, that's it's a great point to bring up. And I think it's important to recognize that while we're really excited about a lot of the changes that we're making to the game, I think there's probably a lot of people, watching the stream that can't help but wonder how it's going to affect them, like we have a lot of tank players in the game. We have a lot of off-tank players in the game. And something that you said resonates with me, where Overwatch has changed over the years. We talked about, before we had hero limits or before we had roll lock, like GOATs was a very popular part of Overwatch for a long time, where people were actually running 3 tanks instead of 2 tanks. And I think one of the things that has always been a part of Overwatch is the game does change over time. And I know that for some people, it's probably jarring to look at a change like this, or maybe it's a little bit shocking, because any time a big change like this happens and you start settling into like a pattern of uncertainty or fear, you really translate it within your current context. But the game will continue to evolve and continue to shift. The shift from the shift into roll lock, it changed some of the meta of the game. Yeah. And now people look at the role of or all of the roles a little different than they did than they did previously. And I think that is a natural result of something like this. And so it might be easy to say, like, well, I'm an off-tank player. How is this going to affect me as an off-tank player? And I get that there's strategy there and there's synergies between some of these tanks, but if you're an off-tank player, if you're a D.Va player or a Zarya player, you can still be a D.Va or a Zarya player. And what we're hoping is when you get in the game, because a lot of this is about how it feels to play those heroes, when you get in and actually feel what it's like to play as Zarya or D.Va, you'll come away really enjoying the experience.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned, which is a really good shout, is that like you kind of view this in the context of like how you have it now, right? Where you're like, well, wait, like if I just had 5v5 today, like how would I do like Zarya, or how would May work? But I think to some of the stuff that you guys have spoken to, especially you, Geoff, like there's just so many changes that go on with the heroes that are involved with this that. Yeah, like I think to your point, Aaron, like you really, once you get a feel of it, that's when you really kind of, it sets in.
Yeah, it is a big overhaul. We get that it's a big overhaul, but at the same time, it still feels like Overwatch when you're playing Overwatch. Like the heroes all still feel amazing and incredible. You have these great plays. There is still a ton of strategy for your team and everybody on it to use. And so I understand that it's a big change, but this is still the same game that we've been playing all along.
Yeah, it keeps all those core aspects that everybody loves about Overwatch, but just kind of like changes a little bit of the core and pushing it forward. The final map we have today, Dion, and that when we were going over like what are we going to show today and like some of the maps, I was like, this map needs to be last because they're just like absolutely stunning. Monte Carlo, talk to me a little bit about it.
Okay, so Monte Carlo, another map where it's this beautiful, opulent, the wealthy in the Overwatch universe go here to play, flying yachts, casinos, luxury hotels, AI F1 races. We're another map. We're having a lot of fun just applying this Overwatch aesthetic to the world and this universe in Monte Carlo or Monaco. So, and this also has a nice story connection to the overall story of Overwatch 2. So look out for that as we share more later. But
yeah, it's just gorgeous. I mean, and the one thing that strikes me about this map, and I think you guys can obviously speak to it the best, is that each point and area of the map plays so drastically different. Once we'll actually see it in play, but is that something that you guys are looking at with map design, of just like how you guys can change like verticality, levels of terrain, really, empower certain heroes or certain roles to really kind of take advantage of that?
We're definitely doing that. And I think a lot of the Overwatch 2 maps have features in them that we haven't built before. Everyone just got to look at Rome, and we have that sort of like switchback section in it, or like the loop section. And that was something we tried 3 or 4 times over the entire course of Overwatch development, and we're just never able to get it to work right. And on Rome, we feel like we finally cracked the code on something like that. In Monte Carlo, there is this really cool uphill section in the map, and it's steeper and longer than anything we've done before. And so there's a lot of like difference in elevation there, and I feel like it kind of just speaks to some of the changes that we're willing to make with this game in order to introduce new gameplay and to have it feel fresh and vibrant for players.
Yeah, I definitely think we can start off that final map. We can keep this discussion going, because that was one of the first things that I noticed about this map. I was like, oh, like we're going straight. I was like, oh, this feels like, very like classic Overwatch, like here's the choke, and then all of a sudden we're going up, and I was like, I can't remember a map, maybe even I think people when they see it probably would compare to like Eichenwald when you're kind of going around the castle, but it's even steeper than that. Like I remember you're looking at it and you're like, oh man, how are they getting up there? Like it's such a cool dynamic though.
Yeah, definitely. And Eichenwald's a great example of it, but of rising through a map, but this one doesn't have a large structure in the middle of it. So you're going up this really big elevation, and it's all open. And so there's a lot more interplay between the two teams as they're trying to push up the hill.
And I love Dion, the spawn rooms with the cars and everything. It's just so cool. As yeah, you just kind of see both of these teams come out of the spawn. Just a lot of detail. I love leaning into the F1 when you have like the kind of car going around the track. Even the checkpoints is being kind of like your kind of checkpoint how they would be in like a race. You see this. So this first point is really interesting. I think for a lot of people is where we'll see Zarya on defense. It's like a solo tank. Like you can play so many different ways, right? I've seen people play like really close up by like some of these staircases, a little bit further back. You can play the snipers up on the bridge. You can play like soldier up on the bridge. I think just adds so much more dynamics to play.
Yeah, and you definitely. Can see the payload is another. We're having fun with the payload here. It's a AI-driven F1 car race. So.
And creating the escort maps, how does that different from some of the other things you guys are working on? Like push, hybrids, controls. Like, is there a different type of philosophy when going into start like a map, for escort versus some of those other modes?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences between these types of modes, and when you do map design on Overwatch, like one of the things you always have to think about is where the spawn rooms are going to be and how you're going to get out of the spawn rooms. And obviously it's different. Coming out of a spawn room is different on a payload map than any of our other map types because you immediately start interacting with the objective. One of the toughest things about developing payload maps for Overwatch is the entire route needs to be like a certain minimum width just to be able to get the payload to fit through it. And usually you want to have enough space on the sides of it so that you can move around. We do have a few tight sections in our maps, but they're very short. Like right after you get the payload in King's Row, it gets very tight, but that's for a short period of time. And so when you do start making these wider areas, it becomes very difficult to control sightlines, and it gets easy to make very long sightlines through the map where it no longer really feels like an Overwatch map anymore because we really try to control those things. And I think it's why you see that a lot of the payload maps they do weave back and forth a lot, and so much of that is about controlling sightlines and then also presenting like difficult areas for a team to push through. Oh, this is the hilly section.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's the area of verticality where like there's a sniper perch up here. It's kind of like that right hand side if we're looking at it. But yeah, just this poses so many different obstacles for teams, but I also think it's kind of presents multiple ways to play where you see right now both teams playing the Zarya, but like you could play really fast and kind of dive up onto the high ground. Like you could play really slow, kind of work your way around. This team is just actually kind of just rolling on through. Zarya seems to be the tank choice of the day.
Yeah,
and you can see
that change is pretty new.
You can see from a visual standpoint that when making a payload map, they're pretty large maps for an Overwatch space. So we want the visuals to kind of change as players complete objectives. The world looks different to them. It was flat before, and then you reach the first objective, and now you're on the hill. And they'll move into the hotel for the final objective. So there's this visual progression to kind of your completing objectives. And you feel like you're making progress through the map because the world around you is somewhat changing as it goes along.
Yeah, kind of like Dorado almost. Like if you were to kind of think of a map from the live game where you kind of start through that choke area, it goes towards that high ground, and then you have that like interior. And the interior for this map is one of the cooler things that I've seen in Overwatch, and hopefully we'll get to see it. But just the tiering of it. How did that come about? With when we can go inside, we'll obviously have a better view of it, but it's really kind of like this multi-tiered vertical kind of like casino. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a super cool space and really fun to fight through. I think over time, Overwatch map design has changed a little bit, just the way that the game has changed a little bit. the presence or the importance of high ground really can't be understated in this game, and so we're trying to give more of that to teams, and trying to create kind of like conflict points in some of these maps, and who's going to control that high ground.
Yeah, no, I think obviously as a shooter, right, their high ground is always kind of the go-to, where Overwatch has always had the ability for, you know, multiple players to take high ground, whether it's like a Hanzo, like we just saw there, like with the wall climb, or a Widow. But yeah, with like a multi-tiered level like this, it allows everybody to kind of have some access of high ground, which brings into play, I know, Ana really kind of effective here at the high ground with the grenades, as we see the payload kind of go over the line, and you know, the car will go inside of the casino. I've seen a few cars inside of casinos in my day. They're usually not moving though. I think you know, depending on how the day went, maybe they're moving, but that's just from my point of view.
This is the hotel portion of the casino, the luxury casino.
Yeah, and you can see the high ground in the back over there. It's actually really difficult for us to put a lot of it into our game. One of the things we do in Overwatch is our stairs are very shallow. And we don't typically have any steep ramps in the entire game. And I think the game plays better that way. It feels smoother like that. But it makes it so hard. It just kills the level designers on the project trying to get people up to high ground, because it takes a lot of space in order to do it.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really interesting point that I guess I've never really kind of taken a kind of a notice of. Yeah, when you like, yeah, the stairs aren't very like these like long, like windy climbs. Like there's kind of turns to get to that elevation. Is that just to keep everything smooth and just kind of movement predictable?
Yep, so that's part of it, to keep it smooth, keep movement predictable. It's also like, it can be really like kind of difficult to overcome a really steep staircase. It's almost like a wall in front of you, and you don't know what's going to be at the top of it. And so we always like for players to be able to run through our maps and to be able to look at a space and kind of develop a mental 3D image of where everything's going, of what the space is actually going to be like outside of their view. And it's easier to do that with shallower stairs. It's also easier to push up a shallower staircase and a higher staircase. And like lastly, just the way that a lot of games character physics work, it's also smoother to move on steep staircases or on shallow staircases.
I was gonna say the only really, I guess, steep staircase I can think of is you know, the one on like Horizon Lunar Colony. You know, on the first point where you're kind of going up towards the balcony. And yeah, that does kind of prove like some of the things that you're talking about, where I know we've all been there where a Junkrat is sitting on top of the stairs with Horizon. You can't see where he's shooting you from, and you're just kind of getting pelted on the way up. It's not the best of feelings, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I don't really know what to say about that. Besides, we are moving away from 2CP.
Okay, keep the combat moving. I love this area. Like you see where that soldier is sitting up top. Like one of the cool things about this map that I definitely saw when watching it was that like the attackers can actually like access that area. Like you can go around where you see
connected up there.
Yeah, curly mustache rotating around, and it's connected. That's something we haven't really seen in a lot of Overwatch maps.
Yeah, we try to. We're very intentional with the way we do flanking routes, and we try to make it so that at least one team, like the team, can be aware of people that are coming on a flank, and we usually don't try to let you get all the way around behind the defense without having some way of knowing that it's coming, or having the offense earning something like that. And we think this one's fair. We've gone back and forth on this a lot. There's been 30 different variations of this route, but hopefully this one's fair.
Depending on how your game goes, it's fair or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on who else is in the test. I actually have some questions from Twitter that you know, some people have been pulling, and just kind of just really, I think, things that people are interested in. For you guys, what change to you know, character buff or nerf you guys most looking forward to that you guys have played around, implemented with thus far?
Wow, I mean it's a great question, to ask yesterday. But I think now that we've gone over a lot of what we've been working on, there's so many changes to characters all across the board, including all the big changes to the tank role, the hero passives that we're introducing with all the other roles in the game. So, as well as like some of the work that we've been doing with like CC abilities in the game. So it's really hard to pick one of those.
My personal one is actually the one that we saw from BlizzCon Line, was the Reinhardt stuff. As somebody who's always wanted to play Reinhardt, who's pretty tragic at it, being able to be a little bit more, this is like selfish, being able to be a little bit more brawly and more offensive is the type of Reinhardt play I want when I just charge in without talking to any of my teammates currently. It doesn't work. I'm sure that
now you can do that.
I'm sure that won't work in Overwatch 2 either, but I can at least put it in my mind that it could be a possibility. Yeah.
That's always the promise of Reinhardt in any version of Overwatch that you're playing, is that moment where you get to drop the shield and go in and just start laying waste to people. Feels so good.
Yeah, it's you play Reinhardt and you come out and you feed a few times, you're like, maybe this isn't for me, and then you just land that one shatter, that perfect shatter, and then you're just like, yep, I'm committing. It's such a good ability. Here's another one from Twitter. How do you guys look at maintaining the balance between PvP and PvE? I assume they're kept like completely separate, like different environments. But how do you guys look at that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because we talked a lot about that earlier when we started developing much larger PvE games. We look at a hero like Winston. Winston is super fun in PvP, but a lot of his enjoyment comes from sort of how much you're willing to commit, and there's always like this risk game you're playing. You're taking space, but you don't want to be too far ahead of your team or your healers, and how you're committing and everything. But it's hard to translate that to a PvE environment, for example. So that in our early playtests of PvE, it was sort of like, it feels like he needs more, and then we started getting into like, okay, well, we really need to talk about if we're going to keep these separate, or are we just making changes to the base hero. So a lot of the, like for instance, the current Winston alternate fire he has, where he can shoot that blast, actually came from PvE first. We were just this is a lot more fun, and like, I wonder if this could apply to the base kit. Plus, we're doing all the other changes of PvP, and so we started playing with it in PvP. So in those cases, like if it feels like it works and we're like enjoying playing it, yeah, we'll totally take it. But I think our general philosophy is try to keep them separate, just so we can make sure that they shine really great in both individual game, or all the game modes, really.
And this
I have to mention one thing really quick, because it's kind of fun. I did early on. I just had to make this prototype, but I did a prototype of like a PvP VE mode, I called it, which was like a hybrid mode, because I think like I get the expectation that people will probably ask about that pretty quick if we want to do that, and so I was like, let's just try a mode of it. And it was a little dirty, because it was like there wasn't a lot of balancing done. It was just like, let's just throw all the crazy PvE stuff in here and see how they work against players. And it was pretty tragic, but it was pretty interesting. And like, there's maybe a version of that. Yeah, exactly. There's maybe a version that we could do that at some point in the future, but we don't have like direct plans for that right now, because it was one thing came out of it like, this is fun, but like, man, this would be a lot of work trying to balance this anywhere close to what it would have to be.
Yeah, we do a lot of experimentation like that, which I think is one of the funnest parts about working on this game. And I know, like, as they were playing Rome, there was a question of like, hey, are we working on, like, do you work on other game modes? And it is something that we do a lot. Actually, the push map, or the push game mode, came out of a whole different game mode that we were working on, as we were kind of trying to solve how you would put a capture the flag into like a main version of Overwatch, and we weren't really able to do it, but push kind of came out of that. And we are working on one other one that I'm really excited about, and hopefully it's something that we'll be able to talk to our players in the community about later.
I love that.
Yes,
more ways to play is totally fine with me, and I'm sure the rest of the community. something that I've actually kind of like found throughout the day, and it's one of the things that's like a little bit newer to the live game. It's like the experimental card, and then some of the things you're able to do there, and try out cool things that look like they've kind of made their way in. I feel like that has been a huge tool for you, just kind of testing out the April Fool stuff. Geoff, I don't know if I can convince you, but give me the Flying Sigma. I don't know how that works in a solo tank, but give me Flying Sigma so I can just battle Pharos and ignore my team. But a lot of some of that stuff is really interesting that you guys are able to try with the experimental.
Yeah, it's been so powerful. I mean, I feel like it's sort of a developer dream in a sense to be like, because you're always just like, I don't know, maybe this is kind of cool. Could we just like show this to people and get their impressions? But,
Yeah.
like, we can't really do that. In fact, we've talked about in the past about expanding, maybe even showing more stuff. But like, what if we showed like crazy early level layouts that was just all like gray box stuff? Like, how early can we show before it gets like really ridiculous? Where we're just like, here's a stick man with a gun. Like, is that just like not even worth giving feedback on or what? But like. So it's been powerful, and we're still looking at ways to sort of use it, and it's just another great feedback tool to get from the community.
It's so funny, we were talking the other day, and it's like the April Fool's patch was ridiculous, but then when like you saw like some of the communities like, oh, this is kind of cool, and you're just like, wait, hold on, we get the Sigma's cool to fly for a day or two, but like we can't have that all the time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we see the blue team kind of approach the final area, and then there was one question actually just about the Overwatch dev team. Like, how has it been? Working from home. How large has the team gotten over the last few years? I feel like it's really grown a lot.
The work from home is a bit of a mixed bag, and when we first started, we were really worried about how productive the team would be, because it's never something it's something we haven't really done before, and the team is amazing, and they actually like really rallied, and I feel like we are just as productive as we were before, and in some ways we are more productive about certain things. It's definitely, there's parts of it that are harder, like we don't all have home offices, like I just work in my bedroom, I just have to make sure I make my bed every day before I go on calls. And then the team, it's really grown. We kind of like when we shipped Overwatch 1, when it launched, we were around 60 to 70 people. And the team has continued to grow from there. And I don't think we're at quite 200 yet, but we just keep growing, because the game that we're making now, Overwatch 2, it's a much bigger game than the original one.
It's even a bigger game than, like, even when I started to hear about Overwatch 2, it was like, oh, cool, like, yeah, like, this is gonna, I want another Overwatch. And then, like, just kind of hearing everything that goes involved with it, with, like, the PvE, and, now all these massive changes to PvP, like, the scope of the game is so big.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. But it's really exciting working on something that has that many aspects to it. And the thing that I like about it, and hopefully what we're showing here today, is that we're able to work on something that's new, and it has all these exciting elements, while still focusing on what like made the original game great. Like we are like, hey, love or hate 5v5, we are committed to like keeping the PvP of Overwatch as competitive as possible, and we are putting so many resources into it.
Yeah, and just pushing the game forward. It's like all the heroes that you love from Overwatch 1, with the learnings from Overwatch 1, just evolutionize, right? Pushing the game forward, coming up with new kind of creative ways to play. So this Transcendence base sealed the deal here.
Yes.
Reaper did his dance on the cart, and he was gone. So that kind of concludes. I'm sure the devs are going to. They'll know who won and lost. I was not keeping score of the matches. I'm sure they'll be pretty angry that we didn't keep score of who won and lost. But just a really awesome showcase of the PvP side of the game today. You guys could just kind of give one lasting message to like everybody out there who's playing Overwatch 1, interested in Overwatch 2 with all these PvP changes today. What would it be?
I guess I'd say thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for like the support and the communication, like the active communication that has been present from our community ever since, even from before Overwatch came out. So one, I'd like to just give a heartfelt thank you to everyone that's watching and has been involved in our communities throughout the years. And I also want to let you know that we are still listening and we are still taking feedback on this game. And more than anything, we just want it to be the best version of itself that it can be. And we're committed to making it that. We come into work every day kind of like passionate and excited to work on this game. Whether it's some of the things in hero mode that we're doing for the PvE side of the game, or whether it's the maps or heroes that we're working on for the PvP side of the game. So thank you all. Thank you for letting us build this game for all of you, because we love doing it.
How about for you, Geoff and Dion?
I pretty much echo what Aaron said, of course. Thanks to community. I mean, a lot of this kind of changes, especially all this experimentation and things we've done starting Overwatch 2, was directly getting feedback from the community and hearing what people liked and didn't like, and hopefully that comes across. Also to mention that obviously I think I've thrown it out a lot already, but this is all like pretty early work in progress still. We're still trying a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I mentioned that isn't even in this, so you can see that we're very actively working on this stuff. So if you like see something like, I see Doomfist running around, smash people against walls, and I can imagine somebody like, oh, Doomfist is still doing his, stun combo kill, but like, I suspect we'll be making a lot of changes to him, for example, especially if we do CC changes. So it's sort of like the double-edged sword of like being able to show you guys the stuff really early is, some of it's not quite done yet, but I think it's been awesome to really, try to keep communication up and letting you guys see what we're working on.
Yeah, and I echo the same thing. We have a pretty incredible team working on the game, the character team, world building, QA, production, concepting. It's quite a crew. We love playing the game every day, and we look forward to getting it into players' hands soon.
Yeah, no, obviously kind of, we're working with you guys on some of the stuff like this, and then some of the other members of the Overwatch team, like your guys' passion to just make this game the best is something that comes through in every conversation. So really excited to see what you guys have in store for the future of the game. Aaron, what's next? What can the community look for? I think you guys have an AMA going on.
Yep, we have one coming up in just a few days. It's going to be on the main Overwatch Reddit, or subreddit, sorry. So tune into that, and I think it's the 3 of us. Don't quote me on that.
He's signing up Dion for it. If it's not you guys, you just got signed up. I'll send the.
Aaron, let me know.
Yes, yeah, someone's gonna be there answering questions.
Yeah, we'll send the Outlook invites. No, we'll get everybody in here counting again, like we did this morning. No, nothing will be needed for that. But yeah, and then we have Overwatch League kicking off again tomorrow. We'll be discussing a lot of the things that we're talking about today here at 11:30 PT. And don't forget, guys, the Overwatch Anniversary event is going on right now in game. Some really awesome skins to earn. You can get that combat, the new Ana skin, by winning games, or you can just keep losing games constantly and eventually get it just way slower. Thank you guys so much for everything today. Truly a blast. Thank you, Aaron, Geoff, and Dion. That'll be it from us. Follow Play Overwatch on all social medias to stay up with all the latest news for Overwatch 2. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm on my way.